All right, I hereby call this meeting of the Richmond Public School Board to order.
Okay. This meeting is being held as an electronic meeting pursuant to and in compliance with the City of Richmond Ordinance 2020-93 and the school board's resolution approved on April 20th, 2020. Simultaneous translation is being provided tonight in Spanish via Zoom, and information was in the notice as to how meeting participants could request translation. The notice of the meeting also stated that the meeting would be a virtual meeting and it would be live streamed on the school division's Facebook page. The public could view it there, and the link was provided. The notice indicated that the board would not receive in-person public comment. However, public comments could be submitted to the clerk, and the email address was provided. And the agenda of the meeting was also posted to board docs, and after roll call, we will state how many board members are participating at the time of roll call.
All right. Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Now, before we have our roll call, Mr. Cameras, would you like to welcome and introduce our student this evening? All right, we'll have roll call while you're looking.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties. Why don't we do roll call and then I'll do it. Hold on.
Okay.
Ms. Page,
Here.
Ms. Cosby, Mr. Young,
Present.
Dr. Sapini,
Yes.
Mrs. Dorr, Mr. Barlow,
Here.
Ms. Gibson, Mrs. Burke,
Here.
Ms. Owen.
Here,
Okay, 6 of the 9 board members are present.
Ms. Gibson is connecting.
She is, okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm ready now, Ms. Owen. I'm sorry.
All right, Mr. Cameras.
Good evening, everyone. I am delighted to introduce Jayla Towns, our student representative tonight. Jayla is a senior at Thomas Jefferson High School, and she currently serves as the vice president of TJ's Principals Advisory Council. She's a member of Delta Sigma Theta Gems and the Alpha Kappa Alpha Ascend program. Her extracurricular activities include captain of the TJ Girls Varsity Volleyball Team, Future Business Leaders of America, and Distributive Education Club of America. Jayla also serves on my Student Advisory Council and is involved in numerous other community organizations. After graduation, Jayla plans to attend an HBCU majoring in political science with a minor in cybersecurity. She plans on joining the Air Force ROTC with the hope of becoming a JAG officer. And with that, welcome, Jayla.
Yes, welcome.
Hello.
Welcome, Jayla. Would you like to share some thoughts with us this evening?
Yes, I prepared some thoughts that I would like to share with the board members and Superintendent Cameras. Okay, so good evening, Chairwoman Owens, Vice Chair Burke, board members, and Superintendent Cameras. I would like to thank you all for allowing me to serve as the student representative for tonight's board meeting. This evening, I would like to talk to you all about the return to school plan for the second semester. The current coronavirus pandemic has taken a toll on the entire world. With all of the lockdowns, shutdown of school, and the overcrowded hospitals, this is a virus that has changed the way we view life indefinitely. I understand that our superintendent, Mr. Jason Cameras, has recommended that Richmond Public School students not return to school for second semester. While I wholeheartedly understand this recommendation, it is something that has saddened me due to the fact that it is my senior year. I won't have the opportunities to participate in senior activities that I've been waiting 13 years for. Some examples include FAFSA week, homecoming, prom, decision day, senior skip day, and many more. This also means that I won't see my friends or some of my favorite teachers this school year. It's often said that senior year is supposed to be one of the best times of your life, and although I can only speak for myself, I'm sure my fellow classmates will agree that this has not been the case. While the decision for all students to remain virtual is necessary to prevent the transmission of COVID-19 in the school setting, I feel that there's another option that we can explore. I would like to propose to the board that you consider allowing the 2021 senior class to return back to the classroom in February. If allowed back, the best reopening plan would be a hybrid method by splitting us into 2 groups and allowing a fully virtual day in the middle of the week. As someone who needs to be taught hands-on and is currently struggling with the virtual option, I feel that this would be the best option as it is easier to socially distance and take the necessary precautions to ensure that no one contracts the virus. By allowing seniors to return to school, there is a certain risk, but I feel that we can implement great safety measures to ensure everyone attends school safely. I would like to thank the amazing sponsors of Superintendent's Student Advisory Council for allowing me to use my voice in this platform to advocate for me and my fellow classmates. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Jayla. You are having some difficulties, Mr. Cameron. All right, thank you. And we'll move on to the agenda. Ms. Wilson. And Ms. Wilson, Ms. Dorr has also joined us.
Thank you. I did see her. I have one amendment, and that is to move the CAFR up to your first item in item 4. And that's the only adjustment I have.
Okay, but that's not an action item.
No,
right?
it's not an action item. We're just gonna, well, we can put it right under, it will be the first thing under recognitions, and I'll figure out how to do that.
Okay, all right. Do I have a motion to move 7.01, receive the comprehensive annual financial review to immediately following public information?
I
So
move
moved, Madam
that we
Chair.
adopt.
Second. All three of us.
I think that was Mr. Barlow made the
fine.
motion. And
Madam-
Paige got her second in.
Madam Chair, I was actually moving
Yes?
to adopt the agenda as amended.
Okay, but we have to amend it first,
I think
right,
we should
Ms.
do it. We
Wilson?
can do it in one vote.
We can do it the way Mr. Barlow is suggesting, to adopt the
Okay,
agenda
all
as
right.
amended.
I second
All right.
that.
Thank you. And that was Ms.
Alrighty.
Dorr.
Yes.
Yes. Is
Thank
there
you.
any discussion? All right,
Ms. Page,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby, Mr. Young,
Aye.
Dr. Sapini,
Yes.
Ms. Dorr,
Yes.
Mr. Barlow,
Yes.
Ms. Gibson,
Yes.
Mrs. Burke,
Yes.
and Ms. Owen.
yes.
Motion passes and your agenda is adopted as amended.
All right, we will move on to public information.
You have minutes to approve, Madam Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry, I did skip that. All right, I have a motion to approve the minutes of the November 16th school board meeting.
So moved.
Don't all speak at once. All right, Mr. Barlow has moved that we approve the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Page has seconded. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, let's have the vote.
Ms. Page,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby, Mr. Young,
Aye.
Dr. Sapini,
Yes.
Mrs. Dorr,
Yes.
Mr. Barlow,
Yes.
Ms. Gibson, is Ms. Gibson still there?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Burke
Yes.
and Ms. Owen.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, now public information.
We don't have very many speakers. How much time, Madam Chair?
I would give them a full 3 minutes.
Okay. Just getting my timer straight.
Okay.
Bridget Newberry, don't until everyone is vaccinated. That makes it safe for everyone. I do not like it. No one likes it, but it is better than being in a hospital bed or dead because of something we did or did not do in school. Margaret Cook, I strongly favor an in-person option for children with disabilities and/or special needs. Virtual learning does not work for this population. RPS has already decided that there will be an all virtual option no matter what. So families have voted to remain virtual. Families who have voted to remain virtual can always make that decision for themselves. However, they cannot make that decision for other families. Furthermore, there is a scientific consensus that open schools do not significantly contribute to community spread. The science just isn't there to justify the immense suffering in terms of children's mental health and development caused by school closures. All virtual school has been devastating for my family. Schools are essential for children with special needs, and virtual school is no substitute. Not having any in-person supports for children with special needs is failing these children. Thank you. Tamika Vincent, I am a proud parent of a second grader at John B. Carey Elementary School. There should not be a vote for reopening schools at this time, and if so, the answer should be a resounding no. Our number one priority should continue to be the safety of students, teachers, and communities. We do not have the proper measures in place to open schools safely. We are too close prayerfully to the end of this pandemic. Why risk the lives and future health of anyone during these later stages? Stay smart, stay home, and stay safe. Best regards. Abigail Jordan, I am a teacher in RPS and have been for 6 years now. I love my job and I love working for RPS. My kids are the main reason I do this, but I am burnt out. I am burnt out because I put all this effort into making the day as engaging while still as rigorous as possible. I am burnt out because after I teach my students our regular day, I teach them Spanish, art, music, or PE, and then support them during float. I spend another 2 or 3 hours on my computer in meetings, whether it be team meetings, coaches meetings, staff meetings, or district PD. After that, it's time for me to plan, which guess what? Is all done on the computer. I urge the powers that be to take this into consideration. While I support staying virtual for the health of all RPS employees and students and families, we the teachers need less meetings. Why must we have district PD every other week? We could better use that time working towards supporting our students through planning. Gregory Bauer, I feel it is premature to make a decision about keeping school fully virtual through the end of second semester. You should revisit in February for a March reopening, especially for younger elementary children, in addition to ESL and children with learning disabilities. 3 months in person is still significant, especially since most children completely lost 3 months last spring, in addition to the shortened instructional days this fall with being fully virtual. This is consistent with what leading health experts say, including Dr. Avula, that benefits of in-person instruction outweigh the risk. There are also multiple studies that show in-person school reopening is actually less likely to spread virus than general community transmission. Schools have rules and people are more likely to follow the rules in a structured setting. 1, vaccine rollout will make a dent in numbers, including teachers getting vaccinated early on. I know it seems too good to be true, but just on Friday, Virginia announced they will have 500,000 doses, enough to vaccinate all frontline health workers and residents of long-term care facilities by end of December. In short, the folks most at risk. Number 2, spring weather and people getting back outside and away from holiday gatherings will most likely reduce numbers too. 3, Biden administration and national strategy for managing virus, including mask mandate. In short, I think we should be making every effort to get our children back in school. They will have been out of in-person learning for a full year by March. Waiting until fall adds another 6 months, 18 months in total. That will be very difficult to overcome. Thank you for hearing my thoughts. Juan Cameo. I read Mr. Young's proposal for reopening our schools. Here's my direct reply to Mr. Young. Your heartstrings were pulled by many. The logistics for your suggested reopening are imperfect. You are gambling on a game plan with people's lives. Until we are all safe, we're not safe. I've lost 2 healthy friends to this horrible plague. How many lives will you be willing to sacrifice for the sake of a few of your constituents who have children with special needs or can't work in a virtual environment or sleep all day because they stay up at night? Whatever the scenario might be, the reality that faces all of us is loss of life. Presently, I'm teaching at home. My students are working, showing up promptly and turning in their work. We have great students at RPS adapting to our new world. We all want to be back in school. I won't go into detail of what we, the students, faculty, and staff are missing. We know. Being with our students is what we live for. Let's do it the right way. Your plan, Mr. Young, is a gamble. We are teaching with love and patience. Parents, guardians, and our families in Richmond are all a part of this challenge. We have new lucid leadership in the White House. President Biden wants to get everyone back to school without taking risks. Let's be patient and come back when it's safe for everyone. Allison Burden, thank you for taking the time to listen to the staff, students, and families of Richmond City each time you have made a major decision regarding our schools and our safety. I have never been so proud to work in a school district that puts safety of their community over everything else. I really want to say how amazing I feel I have been treated as a teacher during this time. I know difficult decisions had to be made, but you so far have made the best decisions for me to support my students thus far. Now, going forward with the end of the school year and making these difficult decisions yet again, I wanted to make sure you knew how my 5th grade year has gone so far before voting. My 5th grade students have finished an entire chapter book together. We have written a narrative essay and a monologue. We have worked in small groups to discuss comprehension of text, and we have had insightful conversations about social, emotional learning and the world around us. We have spent time to get to know one another and time to celebrate the small things. I have seen laughter, smiles, sadness, anger, and fear through the lens of my camera. However, there was a space to talk through these emotions. I still see friendships growing and interpersonal conflicts emerging. This year is as normal to in-person as I could have ever imagined. I am so thankful of the normalcy for me and my students. Surely we have some difficulties. However, these amazing moments far outweigh the hurdles we must overcome. I am in favor of staying with my students virtually to continue to keep them smiling and safe as well, protecting the safety of their families, my fellow staff members, and myself. Thank you for your time. Leslie Saul, I am against this proposed reopening plan because it supports inequity. It also puts those at highest risk at greater risk of COVID. We have no idea what the status of COVID in our communities will be March 1st. Vaccines will not have been distributed to most of the community by then. It all goes against the most recent survey results of our community of RPS families. It will take time and energy away from focusing on planning for implementation of the changes the pandemic has shown us are needed to have the true equity in education for all RPS students and teachers and staff going forward. Kelly Giroux, I am a parent of 2 elementary school students in the 4th district. I support Cameron's recommendation to stay virtual for 2nd semester. Kaisha King, I am a 3rd grade teacher at Woodville Elementary. I wanted to take some time to point out it snowed today. 2020 has been a rough year for students and staff. Even though we are virtual, it would be nice for us to experience snow and snow days. Please consider still allowing snow days when it snows. Some teachers, parents, and students have to travel daily to make sure teaching and learning happens. In short, we still want snow days. Also, thank you for keeping our safety first. I would like to continue virtual for the 2nd semester. If we do continue virtual for the 2nd semester, please purchase programs like 5 PS to help with more interactive learning. Also, please provide students with more supplies. Thank you in advance. Kaylee Kennedy, give the students snow days. The attendance rate is already low on days like this. Let's give them a sense of normalcy and let them enjoy something, especially with the counties, districts around us that are still moving forward as normal with snow days and delays. Kaylin Bryce, as a teacher in the 4th District and a resident of the 6th District, please follow Mr. Cameron's advice and vote for a fully virtual spring semester. This will keep our students, families, and staff safe so that we may finally return to in-person learning next school year. Shanice Fields, I personally do not learn anything from virtual learning. I learn better with paper and pencil. I understand it is my responsibility to have all of my assignments finished on time, but trying to do the work over computer is difficult for me. The way they teach is okay, but I don't really understand what they are saying. Basically, it is easier for me to learn in person, and staring at the computer screen gets headaches. Shama Preston, I would like it if we could stay virtual to stay safe instead of taking chances with catching COVID. The only reason why I say stay virtual is because that we don't want nobody getting sick, especially in flu weather. But if some people need to come back for school because they're failing, then them students should go back. The students that are okay with virtual school should stay virtual so the chances of catching COVID is low. Caitlin Marshall, I am a 2nd grade teacher in the district. After experiencing today's first ever virtual snow day, I would like to suggest that we have snow days off in the future. I believe that this would be beneficial to our children for the following reasons. Snow days would bring a sense of normalcy to the students during such an uncertain time. I also believe that teachers everywhere across the district will have to use the valuable instruction time to reteach everything taught today. Thank you so much for your consideration on this very important matter. Andrew Bryce, I urge you to follow Mr. Cameron's advice and vote for a fully virtual spring semester. The director of the CDC has said he expects the next few months to be the most difficult in the public health history of this nation. Sending students, teachers, and staff back for the spring would be dangerous, reckless, and short-sighted. What would be the point of RPS's actions the fall if we abandon them in the spring? Nothing except COVID-19 wreaking havoc on our community. Janet Libran, I would like to speak with the board members of the Richmond Public Schools to consider repurposing Thompson Middle School for senior housing rather than spending taxpayer monies to tear down Thompson Middle School. Why not use the same tax dollars to enhance the city's need for senior housing? With solar technology already in use in several schools, tax credits for historic preservation makes this need possible. Grateful. Members of the School Health Advisory Board, Lyons Hardy, Isabel Cates, Sarah Shaughnessy, Matthew Sheft, Ramesh, I don't want to butcher his last name, and Clem Winters. The Richmond School Health Advisory Board is composed of clinical and public health experts, parents, teachers, and students in Richmond Public Schools, and serves as an advisory board to the Richmond School Board on matters related to school health and wellness. As health professionals and members of the SHAB, we recognize the varied and complex impacts of COVID-19 on the health and wellness of RPS students, staff, and their families. There will be risks associated with any decision about how school instruction will look next semester, and we ask you to consider actions that will help mitigate these risks. If virtual learning continues, we need to work together to address other very real public health threats beyond COVID-19 that our students and families are facing, namely the social and emotional challenges that are deepened by extended time away from in-person school. Fortunately, there have been encouraging developments in other districts across the country that RPS can adapt or replicate. Building off and deepening the work RPS has done during the fall to try to maximize the delivery of a virtual curriculum, these examples both affirm some of the system's efforts so far and suggest that there is more that we can do to minimize harms and maximize outcomes. Indiana Prairie School District in the Chicago suburbs has invested in strategies to address social and emotional health, including daily check-ins with students, home visiting, individual counseling, and celebrating positive behaviors. San Francisco Bay Area schools are closely monitoring absenteeism, particularly among vulnerable students, such as students experiencing homelessness, foster youth, and English language learners, and following up with absent students or their families with the calls, emails, and home visits. Oakland schools have shared resources to help parents facilitate virtual learning and opportunities for them to connect directly with their children's teachers. Philadelphia and Cherry Hill school districts are limiting screen time by reducing the hours elementary school students spend in virtual instruction and adding time for a 20-minute movement break in addition to a 30-minute lunch break. The San Diego School District has increased support for principals and instructors by facilitating collaboration, sharing resources for teaching virtually, such as videos and shared slide templates. Other school districts are considering hybrid models that allow for students with higher learning needs and younger students the option of attending school in person. And that's the time. That was the last comment.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wilson. I appreciate all those comments from really a lot of members of the workforce, as well as parents and other members of the community. Thank you so much for sharing those comments with us this evening. Okay, and so now we have recognitions. And who's handling that?
I have some that I would like to do first. I'm trying to pull them back up. Give me 1 second, please. And while I'm looking for them, I see that Ms. Cosby has joined us. Mr. Cameras, if you would like to go first, you can. I'm having technical problems now.
No problem.
Thank you.
Well, I am thrilled to recognize 4 of our school board members who sadly will be leaving the board at the end of December. So this is their last meeting of their term, as this is our last meeting of 2020. Those members are Mr. Barlow, Dr. Sapini, Ms. Cosby, and Ms. Owen. And I am thrilled to share a resolution honoring the 4 of you. And so I'm going to try to share my screen if I have permissions. Voila. Okay. So I'm going to read this. Richmond City School Board Resolution in honor of board members Barlow, Sapini, Cosby, and Owen. Whereas Richmond City School Board members, Mr. James Scott Barlow from the 2nd District, Dr. Patrick Sapini from the 5th District, Miss Felicia Cosby from the 6th District, and Miss Linda Owen from the 9th District have faithfully and honorably executed their duties during the 2017 to 20 term, including Miss Owen serving as chair, Dr. Sapini serving as vice chair, and Mr. Barlow serving as the RPS board representative to the Maggie L. Walker Governor School and Code RVA. Whereas Richmond City School Board members, Mr. Barlow, Dr. Sapini, Ms. Cosby, and Ms. Owen, in collaboration with the rest of the board and the administration, helped develop and enact Dreams for RPS, the RPS strategic plan with over 170 community meetings, enacted budgets that brought unprecedented funding increases to RPS, provided a raise to all staff for each of the last 3 years, and created more competitive compensation structures for instructional assistants, bus drivers, custodians, nurses, principals, and assistant principals. Oversaw the construction and renaming of 3 new schools: Henry L. Marsh III Elementary School, Cardinal Elementary School, and River City Middle School, as well as the renaming of Jeb Stuart Elementary School to Barack Obama Elementary School. Took numerous steps to end the school to prison pipeline, including significant revisions to the Student Code of Responsible Ethics, significant investments in restorative and trauma-informed practices, the division-wide launch of community circles and a new social emotional curriculum, and dozens of new counselors, social workers, and nurses. But more. Launched a number of academic initiatives, including new, more rigorous reading and math curricula, new STEM academies at Martin Luther King Middle School and Henderson Middle School, and new advanced placement courses. Provided additional supports for our growing Latino and Hispanic and English learner populations, including the Welcome Center, the Newcomer Academy, Con Ganas, new ESL and bilingual positions, RPS en Vivo, the RPS en Español Facebook page, and increased translation services. Expanded our partnership with families in the community through the launch of the Community Hub model, the Brothers United and Girls for a Change mentoring programs, a new home visit program, a new website, and the Real Richmond History course. Promoted anti-bias and anti-racist policies, including the RPS anti-racist policy agenda and changes to the score to decriminalize student behaviors and better support LGBTQ students and staff. And helped guide RPS through the COVID-19 pandemic by providing over 22,000 Chromebooks and 6,000 hotspots, delivering over 2 million meals since RPS closed last March, and literally reinventing what school is by shifting to an all virtual format, all to safeguard the health and safety of our students, families, and staff. Therefore, be it resolved that the Richmond City School Board and the administration hereby express profound gratitude to Mr. James Scott Barlow, Dr. Patrick Sapini, Ms. Felicia Cosby, and Ms. Linda Owen for their outstanding service to the students, families, and staff of Richmond Public Schools. And we will affix electronic signatures to these. Mrs. Burke will sign on behalf of Mrs. Owen, given the nature of the proclamation. But wait, there's more. You will soon each be receiving, and I'll show Ms. Owens' token of our appreciation. It's hard to read, but it says honoring board member Linda for your leadership and service like schools board 2016 to 2020, board chair 2020, Rich Public Schools. We have one for each of the 4 of you, and you will soon be receiving these. On a personal note, I just want to say thank you so much to each and every one of you for your contributions, your dedication, your passion, your pushes, and your heart ever since I have been here, and for a year before that as well. It is not easy to be a school board member. So for those of you out there watching tonight, please know that these 4 folks and the rest of the board have given their all over this last term, and we are incredibly grateful to each and every one of them, especially to Dr. Sapini, who has served as vice chair, and Ms. Owen, who has served as chair, who I believe will now for real retire, though I know where you live, and there are lots of libraries that are going to need some help, including one that I know of in a brand new school on the South Side. And so with that, I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, on behalf of the leadership team, on behalf of all of our principals, teachers, support staff, all of our families, and of course our students, thank you. We appreciate you, we love you, and wish you all the very best as we head into 2021. And with that, I believe I'm going to kick it over to Mrs. Burke to say a few additional words.
Thank you so very much. I'm grateful for the opportunity of which, Linda, I'm looking right at you. I want to see the big screen because we've grown so close, but I am very grateful to have had the opportunity to work with, I think, a fantastic group of folk a wonderful board that truly continue to put children first. I learned from you, Scott. I learned from you, Felicia, as always. I learned from you, Patrick. And Linda, we've shared a lot together, lots of time, and you will be deeply missed. I just ask that you all keep us close. Don't make yourselves strangers after you've had a chance to figure out what you're going to do twice a month on Mondays. But remember your expertise. I wish I could see Patrick's face now, but he has children with us, so I know he's not gone too far. But your expertise.
He's right there.
I don't see him on my screen. I don't know why.
Mm.
Your expertise, your dedication, your commitment. You've been a wonderful role model for everyone, our children, our teachers, our community, and I'm just blessed to have had the opportunity to work with you. I wish you well, enjoy yourselves, and don't make yourselves strangers, because it would be a shame to put all that good knowledge to the side. Keep it rolling. And thank you so very much. Godspeed to each of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burke. And I see that Mr. Young has a comment too.
Well, Madam Chair, there's no possible way that I could say all of that any more eloquent than Ms. Burke did. But I did want to take a moment to say that I can't imagine anywhere any four finer folks, and it's been a real privilege. And for the public, for any persons listening in this evening, and perhaps they may inquire about at times what it's like behind closed doors, or when we're not in a meeting, and even when sometimes we're at odds as it relates to some policy position. I not only have the utmost admiration and respect for the four outstanding school board members in a professional way, but I consider each of you friends, and I will share. It's funny, still today, folks will sometimes ask me, "What's the biggest surprise on the board? Is there something that really surprised you?" And truthfully, I share with them every time someone still asks that I just didn't fully appreciate how much I would truly enjoy working with all of my colleagues. So please accept my gratitude and my thanks, and look forward to continuing to work with you in new capacities, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young. And Ms. Page.
Thank you. I too would just like to say thank you for these last 4 years, serving as the former chair for 3 of the 4 years of our term. I just want to say thank you to Ms. Owen, Dr. Sapini, Ms. Cosby, and Mr. Barlow. Thank you for always being the champions for the students of RPS. Thank you for always pushing us, holding us accountable. And as everyone has stated, it hasn't always been a smooth road. It's been bumpy, but that's okay. Because at the end of the day, the work that we've done and the work that we will continue to do for those who will be returning is all about our students. It's all about each and every student of RPS. So again, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for the support over 3 of the 4 years as the chair. But again, thank you for all of your hard work. And no, you will not meet strangers because I have all your phone numbers. But again, thank you for all that you have done for the children of RPS. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Ms. Page. Ms. Dorr.
I agree with my colleagues on everything, so I won't pile on, except for to say that I remember when we were at a Virginia Association of School Board retreat, and I can't remember who said it, but none of the school board members said, you know, you all have very different approaches, but one thing that is unique about all of you is that you're deeply committed to equity. And I thought that was a really powerful statement. And so I'm very appreciative of this board for its focus. And I will also just say that you all, even if you don't believe me, have taught me a lot about myself and about the kids of Richmond and about the approach to governing. And I've learned something from each and every one of you. So thank you.
Well, gracious. Thank you all. And I'm sure that we will continue with the meeting. And Ms. Wilson, are you ready with your
I am.
recognitions? Okay.
Yes, the Virginia School Boards Association awards Academy points to board members who attend workshops. And so this evening, an award of achievement will go to Dr. Sapini. An award of recognition will go to Mrs. Page, Mrs. Dorr, Ms. Owen, and Mrs. Burke, as well as Mr. Cameras. I do have your certificates. They will be mailed to you. I just wanted to publicly announce that you all were receiving these certificates.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Nothing like the end of the year, huh? Okay, and then we will move on to receiving the comprehensive annual financial review. Kathy.
Yes.
Good morning. Good morning. Good afternoon for everybody. It was a rough morning with that snow. Thank you for having, am I coming through okay? We
Yes.
don't always use Zoom in my firm, so everyone is slightly different. Thank you for having me join your group tonight. I know you have a full agenda and I won't take any more time than needed. But as you recall from me presenting in prior years, there are certain communications that are required at the end of each audit. Regardless of what type of entity it is, a corporation, a not-for-profit, a school board, and those communications changed from prior year, and the requirement for them hasn't changed. So although I'll be spending the next 7 to 8 minutes with you, you're probably through most of that time going to say, Rob, we heard the same thing last year. Well, you're right, because they require me to positively affirm each year to my clients, because the presumption is maybe you weren't part of earlier discussions, or maybe your first time in a meeting like this and so forth. So they are very straightforward, required communications, and I am going to share my screen. Let me get my PowerPoint up, and I'm going to share this right here and put it in slideshow. Okay. Can everybody see that? I see 4 people. I don't see the whole group, but some are nodding, so you're seeing. Great, terrific, thank you. Again, these are my communications that I have to give to you as the auditor and you as the auditee from the fiscal year 2020 audit of your comprehensive annual financial report, and also some compliance matters that we have to audit. Again, you're going to say, Rob, we know we hired you to do an audit. We know that you have these things that you have to say to us. Again, I'm going to be very brief in some of these slides because I don't want to waste your time basically reiterating things you already know, but there are certain things in here that are very important for me to say again each year. Again, we performed an audit of your financial statements. Because of the nature of some of your funding and so forth, there's different standards we have to make sure we adhere to. One of them is government auditing standards. For those of you who've heard this before, we call it the Yellow Book. It's federal standards that are required to be looked at. Also, because of the nature of your funding, we'll be doing work on your uniform guidance. In the old days, that was called a single audit. And we'll be looking at compliance and controls over your federal grants. Because the state does have some specifications for audits. You have very limited, as compared to a city or a county, you have very limited specifications here in this bullet. But I do have to look at certain things every year. One of the things, for example, is the annual school report and making sure that that was submitted timely and reconciles and so forth. And then also, as you've heard me say in prior years, we were not successful as an industry to have the requirement for census data testing pared down or even removed. We're getting close, and maybe the next year or so that they'll take this requirement away. But basically, we have to look at this data that's sent down to the VRS system so that they know that they have good information for them to put through their actuarial science programs and so forth. And we do that each year as a requirement for you participating in the program with VRS. Overall audit results, what you want to hear from me, the most important slide here. And I used the word unmodified. I explained this last year, and it's basically a fancy international term for clean, basically a clean opinion. So we found your financial statements were fairly presented in all material respects. We had no modifications there. We had no modifications on the control over financial reporting that we had to report to you. We're on compliance. Those last two bullets I just said, those are what we call the government auditing standards area. So again, the actual report you want from your auditor unmodified. The census data had no findings in it also for the VRS. And then our report on uniform guidance, that is still in process. As you all, or as we're all very vividly aware of what's been going on with the pandemic, it has also caused some of the powers that be both at the federal government and also at the entities that set generally accepted accounting principles. They've kind of put some delays on required reporting deadlines. And one of those is uniform guidance, and also specifically the fact that the feds have not decided and not fully determined all the steps that they want an auditor to perform across the United States, whichever firm you have, whichever city or county or school board, the steps they want us to do over the CARES Act money to make sure it's tested for compliance and so forth. So we are all anxiously waiting as an industry for the feds to give out that guidance so that we can go finish our audit work at numerous clients. Those are the results of the overall audit results. And I have a couple communications here on these slides that are, again, they're required, even if they're not applicable. I have to positively affirm to you whether or not they are applicable or not. So first off, accounting policies. There was no real accounting changes or dramatic changes to the accounting policies. The one change that was out of your hands is my second bullet there, implementing GASB 95. GASB is a requirement in generally accepted accounting principles. And what this basically said is we're putting all new requirements on hold. So you all have enough to do already dealing with COVID and CARES Act and teaching kids and running a city and running accounting and so forth. They basically delayed all the implementations that were going to be due this year and in future years by at least 1 year. We're required to make you aware also that unless you have the most simplistic financial statements for maybe a lemonade stand, there's going to be some kind of estimate in a set of financial statements, because not everything can be tied down to an exact cash receipt or exact invoice and so forth. And I'm required to let you know that we look at your estimates. The biggest ones here that had the biggest impact on your operations and your amounts is the middle one there for pension and OPEB liabilities. And we look at those to make sure that they make sense, that they're reasonable, that they are in line or in the realm of line of your peers. And as you can imagine, the estimates are important because if they're used the wrong way, they can manipulate your operations from year over year. And that's why the powers that be make me talk to you each year about estimates. Although in a government arena, it's much more likely that in a commercial arena where somebody could be playing with loan loss reserves or other types of estimates to manage the bottom line or to manage your tax exposure. That's not really what happens in a governmental arena. And so the risk isn't as great, but you do have some very large liabilities and assets that relate to pensions and other actuarial science calculations. And we do look at them each year. Also, we proposed one adjustment that management did not record related to accrual of healthcare costs. We both agree that it's not material to your overall financial statement presentation, but because it was of an amount over my threshold, I'm required to make you aware that we did propose and it was decided from both sides that the adjustment was not needed to make your statements properly reflected in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. This always looks ominous, and it's because that's the headers that the standard setters make us use. But if I was ever to have a disagreement with management over how to report something or audit something, I'd have to tell you that. I'm here to tell you I didn't this year. I have had clients where I've had very long discussions in this type of meeting under the realm of disagreements or difficulties. But because, again, they make me positively assert to each of my clients each year whether or not these two items, in addition to the other ones, occurred, I have to tell you that I had no difficulties in getting the audit done. I would say outside of the normal things we're all dealing with nowadays. Obviously, being virtual, our computer systems have the ability to sync and get information from Ms. Payne, Ms. Bragg, and so forth instantaneously through absolutely secure data sites and so forth. So, really the only difficulties was what all of us were dealing with in life, just trying to keep our sanity during this pandemic that won't go away. I'm required to let you know if I ever heard of management trying to talk to other accountants about how to account for something or how to record something and so forth. It really doesn't happen in government arena. It happens more, again, in the commercial area. And it happens when maybe a company is trying to push the envelope on how to record something. And so they may be asking other firms what their opinion would be in order, we call it in our profession, shopping the opinion, trying to get the end result, like trying to get the end result from one firm over another firm and so forth. It doesn't happen. It didn't happen here at RPS. It's never happened to me in my government, 31 years serving governments, but because it's a standard requirement that I have to say to you yes or no, that's why I'm telling you it did not happen here. We also each year receive from management a required letter. It's from management from the auditee to the auditor, and it represents certain key things to us, and basically things that you want to tell anybody about your overall financial operations, that you're responsible for the financial statements. They're not my financial statements. I give you several pieces of paper, but they are Richmond School Board's, Richmond Public Schools financial statements. That you've told me all any legal matters I need to know about, that you've told me of any site visits that a federal auditor may have come in and done some USDA work or done some other work in Title I and so forth. They're very standard representations. And because they're very standard and pretty much industry wide, if a client was ever wanted to change one of them or not give me one of those representations, I would have to have pause and say, well, that's kind of unusual. What are you not telling me about a situation or an account and so forth? I'll tell you here, as I've done in prior years, management did not request any changes in my standard representations. So it did not give me any pause for anything that they were representing back to me. And I received that letter as part of my required documentation. And then lastly, it's just as important as anything else on these last couple of pages. I'm required to make you aware that we are not aware of any situation, transaction, relationship that would cause my firm, myself, anybody on my team to not be independent of the schools. And now it's important because if I wasn't independent, I wouldn't be objective, and therefore the opinion I give you would frankly be useless. But I'm again required to assert this to you each year, that we go through steps and we keep tabs on relationships and so forth to make sure that we never impair our independence, whether it be in actuality or just in appearance. And those are my required communications. I'm not going to spend really any time on this last slide, just to let you know, I talked to you about these last year. And because of what I said earlier, GASB 95 coming into play, what happens is last year's slide got updated to change the numbers by 1 year on both of these bullets. And because, again, they got delayed by 1 year. And so next year, we'll be potentially reporting some of your activities in the fiduciary area differently than they have been in the current year. And then in 2022, you will likely be putting on your books, it won't impact your bottom line, your fund balance or net position, but you'll likely be augmenting what's already reported in leases by some new standards that are going into play, trying to get the entire environment of leases captured and represented in the financial statements. And those are my required communications, and a little hey, what's coming down the pike slide here at the end for next year and the year after.
Okay.
And I don't know how you want me to proceed. I'm happy to see if the questions I can answer. I also know that auditors are never, nobody wants auditors around any longer than they have to be. So I'm also happy to say good night to you all and happy holidays. But please let me know, Ms. Owen.
Okay, thank you. I don't see that anyone has a question. We look in the chat if we have people who have questions, and I'm not seeing any of those. So all I can do is say thank you so very much. And you also, I hope you have a wonderful holiday and continue your excellent work. Thank you.
Miss Owen.
Yes,
I'm
Ms.
sorry. Miss Gibson I think Miss Gibson had a comment. Miss Gibson, do you?
That was from a while back.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
That's fine.
That's interesting. I do not see it in the chat at all.
It wasn't, it was sent to me and I just saw it, so I wasn't sure. I just wanted to confirm.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Take care. Be safe.
All right.
Leave meeting.
So now we move into our board action items. And our first one is to receive for action the personnel items. So Dr. Lee.
Good evening. The Talent Office brings forward the following personnel actions for your consideration tonight. We have the nomination of 24 employees, the change of contract of 10 employees, the resignation of 4 employees, the furlough of 2 employees, the returning from leave of 1 employee, and the name change of 2 employees.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve the personnel actions?
Madam Chair, I move
Yes,
that
Ms. Burke.
we accept the, let me see, make sure I can say this. So moved.
Okay.
Second,
All right, so Ms. Burke moved and Ms. Dorr seconded
No
the
action.
approval of the personnel actions
Personnel
as
actions.
presented.
Thank you.
I don't see any comment or questions in the chat, so let's have our vote.
Mrs. Page,
yes.
Ms. Cosby?
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Abstain.
Dr. Sapini,
No.
Ms. Dorr,
Yes.
Mr. Barlow,
Yes.
Ms. Gibson,
Abstain?
Ms. Burke,
Yes.
and Ms. Owen.
Yes,
Motion passes 6-1.
okay. Then we move on to receive for action the administration's recommendation for second semester instruction.
Thank you, Ms.
Mr.
Owen.
Campbell.
I'm going to share my screen, so hang with me for 1 second. Okay. Before I dive in, I just wanted to thank all of the members of the RPS community, almost 10,000 who shared their perspective on how we should proceed. We are incredibly grateful for your input. I also want to just say thank you to our teachers, administrators, support staff who have been doing an extraordinary job in the truest sense of that word over the past several months, and certainly with the launch of a fully virtual school system, something that would have been unthinkable just a few months ago. I also want to recognize our families who have been balancing so many different demands, whether those be personal challenges with COVID itself, work, childcare, caring for other individuals. Truly has been a stressful time, and just want to express my appreciation to each and every one of you. And last, to our students, I know this has been an extremely unusual several months for you, and particularly for our seniors. As our student representative noted today, senior year in a virtual environment is very far from what I think our 12th graders expected just even last year, but certainly since they were in kindergarten growing up. And so I want to thank our kids, our staff, our families for all that they have done to make this fall as successful as it possibly can be. And most of all, I think for showing each other grace during this very challenging time, understanding that we are all doing our best to support one another and to be successful amidst this global pandemic. With that, I will formally present to you, as I shared with you on Thursday and shared with the RPS community, that the administration's recommendation is that we remain fully virtual for the second semester for 3 reasons. First, the rapidly rising infection rates. Second, based on the feedback from our teachers and families. And third, because of some unintended consequences that would exacerbate inequities if we did come back in person. We just say a few brief words about each of these. As you know, I've outlined them in detail, but do want to revisit them tonight. First, rising infection rates. We are now in the worst period of the pandemic since it started. Just today, Richmond announced that we have reached a new high for infection rates, and those numbers are trending up and up. I'll show you some graphs in a second, but they are even worse today than they were when I put them into the presentation late last week. We also know that the risk of infection is low within schools. We know that from a great deal of research. But we also know that if that infection were to occur, the likelihood of severe illness, hospitalization, and potentially death is much higher for our student, family, and staff population, given the fact that we largely serve and are served by students, families, and staff of color. And as a recent RTD article noted, here in Richmond, Black residents are being hospitalized with COVID-19 at 5 times the rate of white residents. So the experience and impact of this disease is radically different by race and class, as with many things in America, but certainly this pandemic. And I just want to note, while we are very encouraged by the news about vaccines, we still, based on the available data, do not believe that they will be widely available such that all families, kids, staff, everybody could be vaccinated earlier than at best late spring, early summer. If that were to change and the timeline shifts dramatically and the availability shifts dramatically, that is certainly something we could take into consideration come the spring. I do also want to note that communities of color, and particularly African-American communities, have a long history of abuse from the medical profession being used for all kinds of nefarious actions, vaccines that weren't really vaccines. And as a result, there is understandable suspicion. And so when we think about vaccines in our community, we also have to understand that it's going to take quite a lot of time and effort to share the benefits of the vaccine and to make people comfortable and trusting of the vaccine. So that is going to take our community some additional time as well. These data come from the Virginia Department of Health. As you can see, these are the infection rates for the state of Virginia. We are now even higher than it is here. By the way, this dip at the end here is a reporting dip over the Thanksgiving holiday. We have since achieved a new high. And reaching new highs even higher, as you can see, than back in April when things were most dire at the beginning of the pandemic.
Mr. Cameras,
Yes,
I wasn't hearing you.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Chart shows infection rates by race, and you can see from the orange and red, this represents our Black and Latino communities, the lion's share of the infections. And then these are the CDC core indicators that K-12 schools are to consider when looking at in-person instruction. 3 indicators. One of them, we are in the highest risk category, the number of new cases per 100,000 persons. We are in a lower risk category for the percent positivity, though that is increasing fairly rapidly as well. Next, I want to move to the second rationale, the feedback that we have received from our families and our staff. As of last week, 80% of our staff chose the remaining virtual option. and 63% of our families selected that option. I do want to note that number goes up to 67%, so 2/3 for families of color. It goes all the way up to 70% for our Black and African American families. And so while certainly that's not 100%, I think the predominant voice of our community is clear, and that is to remain virtual. Here are the results from the family survey. This is the English family results, and those percentages reflect the numbers that I'm showing you here. These are the results from the Spanish family survey. And then finally, the results from the staff survey. I'll note, while we received over 5,000, close to 6,000 family responses, while that is only about a quarter of our families, that is the highest response rate we have ever gotten for a family survey. So a rather significant one. And on the staff side as well, we have, I would say, close to 80% of our staff have responded, which is also rather high. So a very good representation. And then third, there are some inequities, unintended consequences that would come about from in-person instruction. For example, as you know, we use our bus fleet to deliver food every morning. If we were to come back in person, even in part, we would not be able to provide transportation for those children to come to school. That means a highly inequitable in-person experience. Only families with cars or other means of transportation would be able to get their children to school. In addition, and I think perhaps even more devastating, if we were to come back in person in part, of course, there would not be a perfect match between the teachers who would want to come back and the children who would want to come back. As a result, we would have to change class rosters. So a student who loves his teacher, his third grade teacher, would have to, in many cases, though certainly not all, but in many, move to a new teacher so that we can make the right match between virtual and in-person and in-person. And that would be highly disruptive, obviously, for all children. As you heard from one of the public comments tonight, teachers have worked very hard in the virtual environment to develop relationships, to forge those social and emotional bonds, even through the virtual environment. Disrupting those would be damaging to all children, but particularly to children who face all kinds of other challenges in their lives, given their life circumstances. And so that is something that I think we must avoid. Above all else, I think offering our children and our teachers and our families stability, the teacher-student bond, and the social and emotional benefits that come from that is absolutely critical. I do want to note and concede there are downsides to remaining with virtual. While this approach is working for many students, in fact, has been better for some students, it clearly is not for others, and we know that. And there are long-term consequences to that. Second, we know that home is not always the safest place for some young people, unfortunately, and remaining virtual exacerbates that. And third, we know that this has been very difficult for our families balancing work and childcare responsibilities. And this will not alleviate that for the spring. I do want the public and the board to know we're doing everything we can to alleviate or at least mitigate those challenges. We've recently launched a one-to-one tutoring program to provide additional academic supports. As you know, on the social and emotional front, we have expanded our partnerships with longtime partners here that provide wraparound supports, places like CIS, RBHA, SCAN, and Child Savers. And we have also, with your agreement, opened up 5 schools as facilitated learning centers with the YMCA, Peter Paul Development Center, RBHA as well. I will concede we need to do more, and I'm hopeful that a stimulus package is on the horizon. It looks like the short-term relief package, about $1 billion, perhaps is on the precipice of being enacted, and that would bring several hundred million to localities, which would find its way to RPS. And then I'm cautiously optimistic that the Biden administration is committed to a much larger package, which would include a significant amount of money for K-12 schools. This has been a key part of the president-elect's platform. And so I'm cautiously optimistic that those funds will be available in the late winter or early spring to provide even more support. I do want to note, we are thinking now about next year. If we were to proceed with the virtual semester, we want to do everything we possibly can to make next year and the years that follow as supportive as they possibly can to make up for any learning loss and to help catapult our students forward. And that is one of the reasons, per the board's request, that we are discussing some modifications to our calendar for next year, including potentially a year-round calendar or an adjusted traditional calendar, but really putting everything on the table to make sure that we really are radical and bold in our approach once we do come back fully in person, so that we can ensure our students are fully successful and not just make up for any potential loss during the COVID time, but to continue to accelerate well beyond that. That's the conclusion of my presentation. I just want to say before the board takes this forward, this is one of the most heartbreaking recommendations I have ever made to you, likely ever will make. I live for being with and around kids, and the thought of proactively recommending to you that we not do that for another several months is heartbreaking. And I don't do it lightly, but I do it because I do believe our number one responsibility is protecting the health and safety of our students, our families, and staff. And given the unique demographic of both our families, our students, and our staff, and all the other reasons I have outlined tonight, I do believe this is the wisest course of action. To all our teachers watching tonight, again, I just want to say thank you for all that you have done, all of our support staff and administrators. To our families, I know this decision will not fall on you easily, that it will continue to place a burden on your shoulders. And I'm sorry about that. And last, to our students, particularly our high school students and our seniors, and our student representative had to go, but I was going to say this to her personally, though. I deeply respect, is she still here? Well, if she is here, I deeply appreciate and respect her comments. I'm going to respectfully disagree and say that because we love our students and we want them to have an opportunity to live their dreams, as I know our seniors do, and all of our students for many years to come, that is precisely why I believe we need to take this step. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cameras. I know this was a very difficult decision, and we do have several members of the board that have comments. First, Ms. Burke, then Mr. Barlow, and then Ms. Gibson so far.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. To our superintendent and his administration, thank you so much. Well done. Usually situations such as this show true leadership. And there are many people within my district, 7th district and beyond, parents, teachers that I've had the opportunity to talk with that are very appreciative, number one, that you have continued to seek their opinions, their thoughts regarding making the right decisions for our children. Knowing that we also have many, as you stated earlier, some students do better than others. However, we can't stop though. And you have continuously moved on ahead of the step and not waiting to see what other areas are doing, but doing what's right for our community. And I thank you for that. The data that you gave regarding African-American students and Hispanic students, so real, so real. I don't know of anybody who does not know of someone in my particular area that has had COVID or has lost his or her life or is still continuously very sick. Because this is a pandemic that knows really no color, but in the end, because of what goes on within my pigment, as Dr. Avula shared during the last school board meeting we had, we're more susceptible. So I thank you for, number one, including the community in this thought of what to do and what's best. And number two, I have two thoughts as we move on for the 21-22 school year. With the virtual piece that's in place, I hope that we don't put that totally to the side. I've been reading a lot in terms of students that if you have to be placed in the area by yourself, you can still learn, that we can really increase our instructional time doing something continuously with the virtual piece. So I hope we have an opportunity to look at that as well. And my last thought is I'm going back to one of the public comments from a teacher stating school supplies. We do have donations of school supplies, so I hope that for second semester, we can get it back out there to our students, because we, thanks to CoStar and the what we had at the supply drive, we do have lots of school supplies left. So just want to make sure our children are privy to receive that as we plan after the holidays in January to come back. Thank you again, job well done, and we'll get through this. This too shall pass. This too shall pass, I promise you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burke, Mr. Barlow, then Ms. Gibson, Ms. Page, and Ms. Cosby.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Camrus, for bringing this presentation to us and outlining some of the key factors that sway or impact this this challenging decision. I have to say that I think I've been pretty clear about where I stand on a return to in-person instruction for the next semester, but a couple of the points that really do hit home to me are the equity issues, in particular the challenges that many in the Black and Latinx community have faced with respect to COVID. The increasing infection rate in our community is incredibly disheartening. I have to say, on a more personal note, as many of you know, that I live with a nurse who's been treating COVID patients, and she just overcame COVID and is now back in the hospital this evening for first shift since having gotten it. And I'll tell you, this is not a unique story. There are a lot of medical staff in our hospitals right now who have COVID, and now that she's back and healthy, she's being asked to work additional shifts. So this is a very real pandemic. We're clearly still in the throes of it, but fortunately, for the first time in a long time, there appears to be a clear light at the end of the tunnel, and I think we're almost there. I think it's gonna require some sacrifice, clearly, to continue operating in the way we have been, but I don't think we can afford to screw it up. I don't think we can afford to increase community spread or put the lives or health of our teachers or staff or students at risk. We already see infections. We're seeing daily updates for infections of people in the RPS family. And I don't think it would get any better if we were back in the schools. And I have to say, my sister-in-law's school in Georgia has opened and closed and opened and closed because of the infections that are going through that building. And although some of this is often downplayed, I can't be more firm in my belief that we have to take this precaution. So thank you, Mr. Camrus and the administration, for your leadership on this issue.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Barlow. Ms. Gibson, then Ms. Page, and then Ms. Cosby.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I too agree with the recommendation from the administration on remaining virtual. My comment is, a lot of what I've heard from folks in my community is not necessarily, well, certainly there are folks that want to be back in the school buildings. But what I've heard is a concern on, closing the door entirely to what might happen. And so my request is that the board consider, while we can make a decision now that we believe will be for the duration of the school year, that we agree to revisit the topic perhaps in early March. So, and also at that time, consider, where we think we will be for summer school, just to check in and let folks know, that we're doing our due diligence, that we do want to be back in the building, and so that we can assure that, we've looked under every rock. So that would be my request as we move forward. The other is, since we've made this decision, we want to make sure that we're doing virtual the best that we can. And so I would love to see a survey go out. We've been doing lots of surveys about whether we're open or not. I'd really love to hear from families and from teachers on, what's been working and what can we do better. I'm concerned about, teacher retention. This has been a high stress time for teachers. And, I know, having to sub, when you have subs and, we're kind of short on staff. So, I know that this is a difficult time. And so I request that the administration consider a follow-up survey to find out, what's been working, how is adapting to the new curriculum. I think there's an opportunity to get more insight, and so that as we move into the second semester, we can customize and adapt accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gibson. And then Ms. Page, Ms. Cosby, and Ms. Dorr. Ms. Page, you're on mute.
Yes, thank you. I would like to just thank Superintendent Cameras, the administration for this presentation, this information. Job well done. And as you have stated, this is something that we did not take lightly in making this decision, but thank you for being proactive, bold in this recommendation, but also keeping our students, families, teachers, safety first and foremost at the forefront. Because this pandemic has created challenges, so many challenges that no one could have ever imagined. And looking at that data, I mean, we all know, I mean, this is something, I mean, it's been reported locally, statewide, nationally about the disparities with COVID. But again, I just want to say thank you. And that may be something that we could look at for next semester. Yes, to get feedback from our students, teachers, to see how can we make virtual learning, make some more improvements, how we can make it better. But I've heard from a lot of families, yes, it's challenging, but this is the safest decision we've had to make. But yeah, it's not to belabor this point, but again, I just want to say thank you, and thank you for being the leader as we move forward. And I'm looking forward to President-elect Biden's administration, their support for public education, because we're going to need a lot of support going forward, a lot of support. And it just really, this whole thing just really has concerned me. as well as a lot of us, because again, we're going to need a lot of support, financial support to help us to move forward, to continue to move forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Page, Ms. Cosby, and then Ms. Dorr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with the administration's proposal. Thank you for bringing that proposal forward. As our president-elect, Joe Biden has said, we are in for a dark winter. And so I do think that it is best to err on the side of caution. Although virtual is not the most ideal situation, as we hear about all the time, it is, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many others that I've spoken to, the safest. And you know, this pandemic, this virus, it mutates. And so right now, while the research says that there's such a low transmission amongst our young people, we don't know if it will remain that way, because of how we've seen it mutate constantly. You know, our symptoms keep growing and growing. And so it is something that is extremely scary, and we do not want to put our most vulnerable population at risk. I will say that, that being said, I agree with my colleague, Ms. Gibson, in terms of really taking a deeper dive into seeing what works and what doesn't. We know it's not the most ideal situation, our virtual environment right now. There are several difficulties that many of our families are experiencing, you know, whether it's logging on or even just the amount of hours that you're staying glued to a computer and the impact of blue light. You know, I know 10 years from now, not only are we going to be studying the impact of COVID-19 when we look at our achievement gap, look at our education, but even the effects of sitting in front of a computer for so many hours a day. So I do hope that we commit to really looking at that and exploring ways that we can get better. There's no best practices, as we always like to say. What are the best practices? We're creating best practices now. And we have to be committed to being able to shift if needed to, and urge, you know, and quickly. Anyway, so I just wanted to articulate my support for the proposal, and I will be voting in support of it.
Thank you, Ms. Cosby. Ms. Dorr?
Thank you. I echo many of what my colleagues have said. You know, we don't want our children and staff to be experiments, and the physical health and being of our community is of paramount importance. I believe this has been, I'm not sure if it's a standing practice, but I would like to recommend to my colleagues for consideration that we have a standing item around sort of virtual school / reopening. So to what some of my colleagues have recommended as it relates to what's going well with virtual school, what can we improve on, but then also this is the second time now that we've had to make this decision about reopening or not. And so I think we've learned a lot about some framework, scientific basis for which we can evaluate reopening in the future, including the CDC dashboard, including family and staff survey results, including our building and retrofitting schedule. And so keeping a monitor on those and having a framework for which we revisit those, I think can be really helpful, so that we're not going back to the drawing board every time we have to make this decision, and monitoring where we are against some of those benchmarks. I think we've done a really great job this year at introducing a lot of metrics as it relates to education. I think this is unfortunately one of the additional metrics that we're going to have to track. I also have heard from actually a number of teachers and community members that would like to see some creative opportunities to get kids outdoors and playing in the spring, socially distant, et cetera. talked with a teacher at Thomas Jefferson that said he wanted to just start doing a class at Monroe Park, and the first 10 people that sign up can attend the class. And so I think there's a lot of creativity on the ground. I know that folks are meeting at Humphrey Calder once a week to do socially distanced yoga. And so I'd like to see some options for in the spring, if transmission rates are low, if we can help facilitate getting our kids outside on a volunteer basis in safe ways, and some potential partnerships. As we've discussed, sitting in front of a computer all day is really challenging for all of us, including for some of our most youngest kids. And I think that could be a way to introduce some cup filling activities for our kids. And then, I'm really concerned about pushing all of this responsibility to our facilitated learning centers. And, we've had a lot of robust conversation as a board about whether we should even open our schools for community organizations. A lot of thoughtfulness went into that, but I do think that it is valid to continue to think about what are we doing for our most vulnerable populations. And if the solution is to just send them to a facilitated learning center, I'm not sure that that's the best thing that we can be doing. And so I really want us to think a little bit more critically about what we're doing for students with disabilities and for students with severe mental health challenges, et cetera. I'm in support of remaining virtual. However, I don't want to underestimate some of the, very real mental health and other impacts, especially to those families that have children with special needs. So those are my.
All right, thank you, Ms. Dorr. Dr. Sapini?
Thank you. I think it's very imperative at this time to really focus on the main thing, the most important thing, which is keeping all of our families safe, because we cannot get complacent just knowing, oh, there's a vaccine coming, things of that nature. And even after the vaccine, you cannot all of a sudden decide, okay, well, let's open right away. Yes, we certainly do want to have our students back, in the buildings, but this is not the time for that. This is the time to be safe. This is the time to be consistent. And even after the vaccine, we need to continue to do the same. I'm very glad that the administration is looking forward to next year in preparation, because you never know when something may arise. Again, because a vaccine is coming, I'm sure it's possible that many people throughout the country, throughout the world, may get a bit carried away, and we have another backslide. So I just want to say that I'm in full support of this recommendation, and just keeping our families safe. There hasn't been a week for a while now, really, that we haven't heard of staff members and students that have had, been tested positive. So that alone, if nothing else, should indicate that we need to continue to do virtual. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sapini. Mr. Young?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Too, like my colleagues, believe it's incumbent on us to rightfully respect the wishes of our stakeholders, our teachers, staff, our families, who largely, overwhelmingly prefer to stay virtual for all the reasons that the superintendent, along with my colleagues, had identified. Something like 80% of our teachers and staff, and about 2/3 of our families. But I also think it's incumbent to rightfully listen to the about 1 in 5 our teachers and staff, and about 1/3 of our families who identify they prefer.
Mr. Young, are you still with us? Mr. Young? He seems to have left us. Well, until he comes back, I realize that we don't have a motion on the floor. We've had all this discussion. I did not start by saying who would like to make a motion in regards to the administration's recommendation. Do I have a motion?
So move.
All right,
Second.
All right, so Ms. Page has moved that we accept the recommendation of the administration to remain virtual for the second semester, and Ms. Burke seconded. So now we can continue the discussion because Mr. Young is back. Mr. Young, you may continue. Now we have a motion even.
Oh, Madam Chair, I apologize.
That's okay.
In short, I understand there's a motion on the floor. I will be brief and share. I do think it's important to, at the risk of belaboring the point, respect the wishes of the majority of our stakeholders who prefer to stay virtual, but I do think that it's incumbent on us to also recognize that the significant percentage of our teachers, staff, and our families are requesting some limited option. In particular, I will share with you that in literally thousands of conversations at folks' doors, at their doorstep this year, the most frequent topic of discussion pertained to our special needs or students with learning disabilities, as it relates to this discussion about second semester. And like has been said by Superintendent and Ms. Dorr, along with others, I hope we would not, and I know we won't diminish the real harm and pain and anguish that so many of our students, including some of our most vulnerable students, are experiencing. And Madam Chair, I apologize. So I missed the motion, and I'm sure
The motion was to approve the administration's recommendation.
Well, Madam Chair, and it's been seconded, is that correct?
Yes.
While I have the floor, then with your blessing and consent, may I propose an amendment to said motion then?
You may.
Madam Chair, I would propose that effective March the 1st, teachers may, on their own volition, opt in to teach in person, contingent on an adequate number of students with learning disabilities requesting in-person learning. Teachers will choose a temporary faculty assignment for the balance of the 2021 academic year at one of 13 school campuses. Facilities will be limited to Huguenot High School, Bouchal Middle School, Lucille Brown Middle School, Martin Luther King Middle School, River City Middle School, Blackwell Elementary School, Broad Rock Elementary School, Cardinal Elementary School, Henry Marsh Elementary School, Miles Jones Elementary School, Linwood Holton Elementary School, Oak Grove Belmead Elementary School, and Overby Shepherd Elementary School. Each of the preceding facilities will open subsequent installation of bipolar ionization at the site, along with renovation of bathroom facilities on site as identified in the November 16th, 2020 report to the school board. For students with learning disabilities that opt in to in-person learning, the schedule shall be comprised of 4 days a week in person, 1 day a week virtual. Madam Chair, I respectfully introduce that motion as amendment to the motion on the floor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Young. Is there a second? There's a comment, Mr. Barlow.
Madam Chair, I'll wait. If there is a second, then I'll make a comment otherwise.
Okay. I do not see a hand raised or a comment in the chat. Therefore, I'm afraid that your motion fails for lack of a second, Mr. Young. But perhaps that is something that you can consider with your new board. Okay, now Mr. Barlow and then Ms. Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to speak to Mr. Young's motion in the event that it was being more widely considered. But I guess my overall point was that although I certainly appreciate and understand the desire to have students with disabilities return, I think it may be a decision that's best left up to the board at a point where there's current data and information that the board can consider at that time. So I'm sure that this is something the next board can discuss as well.
Thank you, Mr. Barlow. Ms. Gibson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, following up regarding the motion on the table, I mean, I do also appreciate the challenge, this, specific challenge for those students with special needs. But I really think it's important that as we make these decisions, that we recognize that, logistics are a very real thing. And, the ability to, hope that the stars align with those teachers that we would need in the building, that we'd have enough of them, that, that their skill set aligns with the skill set needed for those students with special needs. It's one of those things that, it's, I don't know. I mean, I think it's easier said than done, and I think also, while those students with special needs are those academically we want to support the most, but also those are our most vulnerable students, and their health and safety matters just like everyone else's. And so I want to ensure that as we are making these decisions, that we consider, all the ins and outs from a logistic standpoint. That was, I think, a challenge too, as we were working on rezoning last year. The way that we do it, the way we execute, it's a really real thing. And so we want to make sure that as we are making decisions as a board, that before moving forward, we've considered all of those, parts and pieces, so that we are making decisions that are truly executable.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Gibson. I see no further persons wishing to speak, so let us have the vote, Ms. Wilson.
Okay, the motion was made by Mrs. Page and seconded by Mrs. Burke to approve the administration's recommendation to remain virtual for the second semester. Ms. Page?
Yes.
Ms. Cosby?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
No.
Dr. Sapini?
Yes.
Mrs. Dorr?
Yes.
Mr. Barlow?
Yes.
Ms. Gibson?
Yes.
Mrs. Burke?
Yes.
And Ms. Owen?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-1.
And I also say thank you to Mr. Cameras for the presentation. All right, moving on to budget transfers. Ms. Udesco?
Sure. Jason, did you want to do the CIP one, or did you want me to do both? I'm happy to do whatever you prefer. And I can also start with the speech language.
Why don't you just do both?
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. Wanted to bring to you for consideration 2 budget transfers. So let's start with the speech language pathologist. As you've likely seen over the last few meetings, we are slowly trying to reduce our dependency on external contractors for services provided and bring work in-house for lower cost and to ensure greater consistency within those services. So here you'll just see a reduction in the cost of 1 FTE from our current speech pathologist contracted line item to be able to hire a full-time employee. This posting remains open as we continue to find great candidates. We hope to bring to you future reductions in that contract amount.
Ms. Udesco, can you share your screen for this so that everyone knows what we're talking about?
Oh, sure. It's also in speech language. It's posted in the Word docs, but let me see if I have share screen privileges. One moment, please. Okay. Is that showing for folks?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. So here you'll see the standard cost of position, $81,500 reduced out of our professional services and put into a full-time staff member with benefits and such at 81.5. There's no change or reduction in services to students.
All right, thank you.
Did you want me to do both of them, Ms. Owen, and one vote, or vote separately on the two items?
Well, let's see if there, we'll just go with it since you've said that.
Sure. Okay. The second, and I'll share my screen for this one as well. So at the last meeting, we talked about our bipolar ionization work, the work to ensure improved and safe air quality in all of our schools as we prepare for in-person instruction. And we gave the price tag for that work to be roughly $5 million, noting that there could be some additional costs as we put the unit in our current air systems and found that perhaps the unit needed to be replaced. So we had guesstimated perhaps about $500,000 as needed for current replacements. While, as Jason has shared, we do expect in the coming months to receive additional federal dollars to support COVID efforts, we want to be able to begin this work now. And so are proposing 4 projects that previously had been approved by the board for usage of CIP, the capital improvement dollars, to be deferred. And also in the last month, have found from the city that 2 of the items are not going to be allowable, despite what we had believed to have been earlier indications that they would. So you'll see here those 6 projects.
Just to clarify, not allowable as capital expenditures.
Excuse me. Yes, thank you. We will pay for them in other ways, just not out of the CIP dollars. So you'll see here there are 6 projects. One is an athletics project at Henderson. One is parking lot repaving at the Transportation Belt Boulevard location. Window replacement at Raz. I'll jump down to the intercom and bell upgrades at schools across the division. Those 4 projects we would seek to defer, potentially proposing them in the fiscal year 22 CIP budget that we'll bring to you in mid-January. And then the 2 items that were not allowable as to use CIP dollars, as the city determined they didn't meet full CIP guidelines, were the upgrade of our security cameras and our wireless infrastructure enhancements. As you likely recall at the last board meeting, the board already approved for us using other funding a $1.5 million budget transfer to begin that wireless infrastructure work through other means. So this would free up for us very close to what we believe is the total amount needed for the air quality work. And obviously, as it got underway, we would see if additional funds were needed or if actually this was close enough to the $5 million estimate to complete the work.
All right.
So we look to the board for approval on both on the actual budget transfer and then the project transfer for CIP.
All right. Then I need a motion to approve these budget transfers, one from our regular budget and one from the CIP budget. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Madam Chair.
All right, Mr. Young has moved it. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Burke has seconded. I am not seeing anything in the chat about anyone having comments or questions.
I think Ms. Dorr and Ms. Gibson have written in.
Okay, now I see. Ms. Dorr, Ms. Gibson. Okay, so Ms. Dorr, then Ms. Gibson.
So I apologize for not sending this over in advance, but I did
receive an email from a constituent who is a mechanical senior engineer who flagged some concerns about bipolar ionization, specifically about the levels of ozone emitted and potential negative consequence for individuals. So I was wondering if you had done any research into any potential negative consequences. And then another flag that reported that no matter the type of filtration that is added, it will only be as good as the installed air distribution system. So if rooms do not have a central ventilation system, they wouldn't receive any benefit from increased filtration. So just wondering if you could speak a little bit more to any potential negative consequences of levels of ozone, as well as concerns about any of these systems working in the absence of a central ventilation system.
Well, I can't speak to the ozone, but I will get back to you and the board on that. For the second, I guess I'd need to hear a bit more, as well as our research and understanding was actually that it does work on the units, and that's why we had the breakdown, like the window units and such. That's why we had the breakdown of the different types of air systems in the building. So it is not my understanding that central air is required, but I'll certainly follow up on that. And if you had information you wanted to forward, I'm happy to review as well.
I will, and although I'm extremely in support of increased maintenance for our schools, I think this just brings up some flags for me that I don't feel comfortable supporting at this time. So I'll be voting no.
All right, Ms. Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate the concerns that Ms. Dorr brought up. You know, our buildings are so, you know, they're old buildings. And so, so I do think it's important that we ensure that whatever the fixes that we look at to address, you know, the fact that the ventilation is very bad in the buildings is a suitable, you know, solution given the fact that these buildings are so old. I would also like to know, as from a budgeting standpoint, if there are other line items that were considered to fund this particular action. You know, the sashes, the window sashes on the alternative school seems like a pretty critical need. You know, there's the project in my district, the athletic field and the basketball courts. So I just was wondering, you know, what were the you know, kind of the things that we were looking at that we wanted to make sure we prioritize, you know, and were there other things that we considered as we're considering, you know, where to find the funds for this potential change?
Thank you. I am texting right now with Bobby. And so while this may be insufficient answer, Liz, I at least wanted to share what he responded. He said the ozone concern is related to UV lights, which we're not using. So bipolar is safe related to ozone levels. So there's some nuance there in the lights. I'll get a little bit more detail, but that does not appear to be applicable in our case. He's responding to a second point that I don't want to share until I have more clarification. Kenya, to your point, we did not look at other funding sources for tonight because we didn't want to be presumptuous about the board's vote on being virtual. Now that the board has voted to do so, I certainly know one line item that can be explored would be related to contracted transportation, much like we.
If I may jump in, I believe Ms. Gibson was speaking to what were other pieces of the CIP that were
I'm sorry.
Under consideration. I can answer that. By and large, they were related to air quality. So HVAC updates, AAUs, things of that nature. So we wanted to hold harmless anything that was related to air. And then frankly, this was the balance of what's left.
All right, Mr. Barlow and then Ms. Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm curious to get some more detail. I think this is something that the board will probably want to watch out for in the future as well, about determinations being made that certain projects are not allowable under the CIP. I know that we've encountered this before on some issues. So I would be curious to hear more about the why the security cameras and wireless infrastructure enhancements are not allowable. I get the impression that those may be CIP related expenditures in some cases in other parts of the Commonwealth, but obviously I don't expect a robust answer on this now. So I'd encourage the board to continue to look into that to see if there are any situations where the city may be a little bit more stringent than is necessary for CIP expenditures.
All right, thank you, Mr. Barlow. Ms. Gibson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Another thought came up too as we were talking. I mean, I think that, the district has a lot of really heavy operational needs. And I wonder, we have a vacancy on our staff in the cabinet level. And I'm wondering if there is any update in terms of hiring chief operations role, and if there is any thought about having leadership both on the finance side and the operations side. I think right now, considering all that we've got going on, that having someone dedicated to operations would be of a big benefit, I think, for the district. And I just am curious to know where we are in that process.
Ms. Owen, if you'd like, I can share that we've interviewed a number of finalists and we'll be making some determinations in the next couple of weeks.
All right. I don't believe we have a motion to approve the budget transfers, do we? Ms. Wilson, did we have that? That's the one Mr. Young made and Ms.
Yes.
Okay.
And Mr.
So we
Burke
do have a
second.
motion. We have a motion, and hopefully I'm getting it right that the last person in the chat that wanted to speak has been recognized. So
It's on. I'm sorry.
yes, Ms. Cosby.
I'm sorry. I just typed in comment. I was just going to say I'm going to abstain from this vote. I think it's important, given some of the considerations that Ms. Dorr brought up, that they be explored and that information provided to the district, as well as if there are any other funding streams that had not been considered or were considered, just depending on how the board voted, Michelle, virtually. So if there are other areas, what have you. So I would really want to hold off on this until we get more information, which can be presented to the new board. And I would just suggest in your onboarding process for the new board to ensure that this is something that is that they understand will be coming up and would need some type of decision.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Cosby. Ms. Page?
Thank you. My question is this a time sensitive matter, and how does it impact, school buildings, our children? I mean, I know that we are virtual, but what's the impact of not making a decision tonight?
The lead time to be able to purchase is 6 to 8 weeks, and then we would need to install it in all of the units around the division. So there's urgency as we think about preparation and also, of course, as we think about what happened with the Chromebooks, as more and more divisions are considering air quality, supply just becomes limited. I can't, of course, speak to exactly what would happen here, but I do think it's something that we would need to make a decision on very soon, if not tonight.
All right, Mr. Young and then Ms. Dorr.
Madam Chair, I was going to speak to what Michelle just addressed. We've, I think, rightfully identified that bipolar ionization is an essential component of our efforts to resume in-person, whether that's sometime in the summer or in the fall. And I don't think anyone should underestimate how very long how very long it will take to install this equipment in all of our infrastructure. And to that, propose that we indeed vote on it this evening and renew my motion there too. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Dorr.
I don't doubt that, as I said at the top of my comments, certainly I am in agreement with Mr. Young that retrofitting our buildings and creating better air filtration is paramount. And I do apologize for not providing this information in advance. It does give me pause though, and I can't in good confidence vote on it tonight. However, I was wondering if the board, if there's a majority to vote for it, then so be it. We could consider a proposal like Mr. Barlow's at the start of COVID, in which the board could, if Mr. Camrus sends the proposal to the board, so long as there aren't more than 2 board members that object to it, that it moves forward. So that could be a way to find some common ground, giving the district some time to respond to the concerns brought forward tonight. If that's not something that you'd like to pursue, Ms. Owen, that's fine, and I'll just abstain.
I would say at this is the last meeting of this board, and therefore I would need to ask Ms. Lilly if we could do something like that. Seems like it would probably have to wait. If we don't decide tonight, it would have to wait till the new board is in place. Ms. Lilly?
Short answer to that is yes, if you're not going to take formal action on it. However, if the board chooses tonight to direct the superintendent, I'm not quite clear, Ms. Dorr, on what you meant by the proposal, because he's made one tonight. I wasn't sure about those details, but so if you can explain a little bit further what you meant, that may be helpful.
I don't want to derail this into a big procedural conversation. At the beginning of March, Mr. Barlow made a motion that said that Mr. Camrus was able to make emergency purchases related to COVID. So long as he provided board members information about that purchase, board members had, I believe, 48 hours to respond. And so long as if 2 board members objected, it would not go forward. And if no one objected, it did go forward. So my proposal would be that we could give the administration some time to respond to these questions. But if I'm the only, one, Ms. Cosby and I are the only 2 that feel discomfort around this, then so be it, and let's move forward.
All right, well, let's take this vote and see what happens. And if it fails, Ms. Dorr, then you can make another motion. Is that okay?
I have a comment.
All right, Ms. Faye.
It was more of a statement. I guess I'm concerned about us not moving forward with this, because just in some of my research, also receiving information from experts, I'm not talking about locally, but it talks about, I've heard so much about the air filtration in older buildings and how it just has such a negative impact on our students, teachers. So I'm just concerned not moving forward and not putting those the infrastructure in place to make sure that the air quality is safe for all of our children. Because if you look at studies, it talks about the air quality, especially in urban communities, urban neighborhoods, that the air quality is much worse and it has an impact on your life expectancy and everything. It's just, I guess I'm really getting into the science, but a negative air quality does have an impact on your life expectancy and the quality of life. So I just want to, just want to express that.
All right, Mr. Barlow, then Ms. Cosby.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could the board not vote to authorize to move forward with the procurement process and then have the administration, I mean, since it would be 4 to 8 weeks to go through the procurement process, by then presumably the next board will have had a meeting. Then the board could just vote to an up or down after having a little bit more time to have the discussion. It seems to me that we don't want to unduly slow this down, but there may be an opportunity to get an additional say before all is said and done with the purchase.
Ms. Owen, may I offer something in response? If the board approves this tonight, we will begin the process of putting it into place. But I assure the board and glad to publicly commit to placing on the agenda at our next meeting an update on the ozone issue. Of course, if it is concerning, I will press the brakes on the process, give you a full analysis of how we should modify our approach. I do humbly request, though, the board's support tonight so we can at least begin the process and not lose a month in this work.
All right, Ms. Cosby.
I was just going to say, I was just responding to my colleague, Ms. Page. Yeah, I too am extremely concerned about the air quality, but I don't want, this is something that I had not heard what Ms. Dorr had brought up, and I don't want to do anything that is as detrimental. And to make a decision. And to make a decision when it has been brought up, and then later on down the line, we say, oops, well, it might be a problem. So, it would be great if we could just get information before we vote. So again, we can make an informed decision. That's all.
Okay, Ms. Dorr and then Ms. Gibson.
I'm okay.
Ms. Dorr?
I'm okay. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Ms. Gibson?
Yes. So regarding the suggestion made by Mr. Cameras, I think if the motion was modified to note that we would be providing approval to begin procurement, and so if it was very explicit, I want the motion to be explicit that we would approve proceeding with procurement, and that a final approval for proceeding would be determined by the incoming board. I wouldn't feel comfortable voting in support of the motion as it stands on the table now.
Okay, the motion is just to approve the budget transfers. So it doesn't specify. All right, so Ms. Dorr has
I motion to make an amendment to approve, as Ms. Gibson, I just typed what she said, to approve the proceeding with procurement with a final approval to be determined by the incoming board.
Ms. Owen, may I just make one note?
Mr. Cameras?
Presumably, given the price tag on this, it will be well over the threshold for any contract that requires board approval. So it will, by necessity, come back to the board. That being said, I'm more than fine with the proposed amendment.
All right, Ms. Gibson, did you want to second
Sure.
Ms.
I'll second
Dora's
that.
motion? Okay, so let's have a vote on the amendment. The amendment is
The
to
amendment was,
approve.
go
Oh,
ahead.
you got it. You go ahead, Ms. Wilson.
The amendment is to approve proceeding with procurement, and a final approval would be determined by the incoming board, and that was made by Ms. Dorr and seconded by Ms. Gibson.
Yes,
Okay,
you
all
see
right.
it in the chat, Ms. Wilson?
I took it out of the chat. Thank you.
Okay, all right. All right, so if there are no further comments or questions, we'll go ahead and vote on the amendment. Ms. Wilson?
Mrs. Page,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Dr. Sapini,
Yes.
Mrs. Dorr,
Yes.
Mr. Barlow,
Yes.
Mrs. Gibson,
So I'm abstaining simply because I want to know other line items. So just know that I'm abstaining for that reason.
Mrs. Burke,
Yes.
and Ms. Owen.
Yes,
Motion
All right.
passes.
yes, so now that was the amendment. Now we need to vote on the motion.
Actually, so I should
To-
have voted yes. I should have voted yes on the amendment and no on, and abstain on the motion. My apologies.
Okay, that's okay. You got that straight, Ms. Wilson?
I did.
All right, so now we're gonna vote on the motion as amended. Okay, does everybody understand? The motion is to receive, we're gonna take action on budget transfers, but with the amendment, so that it's all gonna start, but nothing will be spent until after the new board takes office. Okay, let's go, Ms. Wilson.
So the motion now is to approve the budget transfers as presented and approve proceeding with procurement, and a final approval would be determined by the incoming board. Ms. Page,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Dr. Sapini,
Yes.
Mrs. Dorr,
Yes.
Mr. Barlow,
Yes.
Mrs. Gibson,
Abstain.
Mrs. Burke,
Yes.
and Ms. Owen.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, then we move on to 4.04, receive for action the audit charter.
So good evening, everyone. I wanted to present to you and bring to the board the updated and approved audit charter from about a couple of board meetings ago. We presented the audit charter and was asked to then have it reviewed by the school board lawyers. So that was done, and I want to present it to you. I want to share my screen really quickly here. All right, so here you have the updated RPS internal audit charter. Again, this is pretty much the standard document that puts us a direct report to the board, as well as it gives us a scope by which we work and perform our work on behalf of the board. We made some adjustments. One, to add in some work, talk about our reporting structure in how we report to the board per se, more so than, we work collaboratively with the administration, but we work directly, functionally with the board and for the board. And pretty much that was it overall. From a lawyer perspective, I know in talking to Ms. Thompson, she just wanted to make sure some things were established as far as how people would report, how an audit could be requested, as well as fraud, waste, and abuse hotline and the differences in those. And we talked through that, and she was good with it. And now I'm bringing it back for you all for voting and acceptance of it. Any questions?
All right. I'm looking in the chat. Ms. Gibson?
Thank you. One question that I had in the document I want to make sure that the way it was worded, it appeared to me that the kind of work of the board of the audit is provided to both the board and to the I think it's defined as senior management. So I wonder if there could be a bit more clarity about the definition of senior management, and then also would it be possible to note that that the audit team would have some discretion if there were some items that the audit team wanted to share directly with the board ahead of any administration.
All right. I'm just writing a couple of notes. So when we talk about senior management, those in that account encompasses the audit T itself. So we once we perform that audit with the direction of or the process area or the auditable entity, we then once we do the report, it is the job of auditors. We kind of have a duty to give those things back to the operational stakeholder. In this case, it would be the chief. It would also be Mr. Cameron. He receives all the audit reports, as well as that maybe director and somebody from the board, so that they know what the problems are, and they have that actual audit in hand to say what happened during the audit. So when we say senior management, we're talking directors and above.
That's helpful. Thank you.
As far as special reports to the board, I think it is written as it may not be in the scope of the audit, or I would have to look at it again. Let me look, just make sure. I thought it was written in here somewhere. If not, we can go look at it. But we always have the discretion. We're at the board's discretion to a very high degree of when we can report things to you all directly. And if it were something that we thought in an audit that we were performing an audit, and we thought it was something that it needed to be reported to the board first in front of the actual auditee, that is a meeting we would call. We would request a closed session, and then we would actually talk through what those audit findings were. Say if it was a fraud or something like that, or something that was very material to that would impair the school system, that we think you all should know in front of that, and we're finding those things through an audit. We would then call a closed meeting and we would discuss those things in a closed session with you all, so that you would know how we should operate or how you want to move forward with that. Because again, it's our job to find it. It's you guys' job to kind of make the decisions on which way you want to go once we get that information.
All right, thank you, Mr. Parker. Ms. Page?
You're on mute, Ms. Page.
Yeah, thank you. But I just want to, for clarity purposes, the internal auditor, that whole function, is an independent entity from, yes, they collaborate with the administration, but it's a separate entity. And I think Mr. Parker made it very clear. The internal auditing function is the eyes and ears of the board. So I fully support the work of this audit work plan, and I look forward to starting the work and moving forward. And thank you.
All right, Ms. Dorr?
Mr. Parker, are you looking for a motion to approve this?
Yes, please.
I motion to approve.
You
motion to approve.
You move to approve. You move to
second.
approve. And Ms. Page seconds. All right. I don't see other comments, but I'll wait a moment in case. Not seeing any. then Ms. Wilson, we will take our vote on the move to approve the, now let me get the correction, approve the audit charter as presented.
Mrs. Page,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Dr. Sapini,
Yes.
Mrs. Dorr,
Yes.
Mr. Barlow,
Yes.
Mrs. Gibson,
Yes.
Mrs. Burke,
Yes.
Ms. Owen.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right. That was the end of our action items. Now we will hear some things. Let us go to the fiscal year 20 year-end SAF audit.
All right, so it looks like I'm back up. So what we did, one of the audits we've recently completed was SAF for fiscal year 2020. That audit report, and I want to just share the results with you. I do want to say in to kind of preface this a little bit, I know you all received the turnover audit about 2 meetings ago as well, a couple meetings back, just the whole school turnover audit. We did assume, and we kind of thought the audit findings would be very high to start out. And this one is no different. However, I will say that I feel like we're going to get better real fast as we go through this. So give me a second. Let me share my screen. Okay. That's not that. Okay. Here we go. So that's this one. So I'll be sharing 2 documents. The first document is just the comprehensive document. This is kind of the statement of accountability or the financial statement. Just noting we did a overall sample cash receipts and disbursement test for fiscal year 2020. The financial receipts and disbursements for this year or the past year, $1.5 million or $1.58 million actually. And this is a statement that's prepared by finance. So I want to give finance its credit. Finance actually prepares this statement. We use this statement as an audit, as something to do the audit with, the source document for our audit. And then we sample schools and go out and do receipts and disbursement testing to make sure there's no material findings as far as actual cash coming in the door, cash going out of the door. And again, I know this is a rather large balance right here because the purpose, again, for student activity funds, in a perfect world, it should be 0 at the end of the year, we would hope, with very, very minimal balances. However, with the pandemic, there has been a lot of change and a lot of parents or a lot of effort in trying to get refund checks back to parents and things of that nature. So that contributes a lot to the balances here. All right. And then I'll share the next document, which is actually, stop share. And then share again. Share. And so here's our memorandum again with the observations. And so here's where we do most of our work. Very kind of in contrary to what you saw earlier with the external auditor or what Cherry Becker found, we go a little deeper. We kind of get to the nooks and crannies. We get very granular to things we're looking at when it comes to internal audit. Our scope is a little broader. And so with that being said, for 2020, and I'm just going to read this briefly, we looked at 47 schools, 27 elementary, 11 middle, 9 high schools or specialty schools. PTAs, of course, PTOs, fundraisers, grants, things of that nature. All right. Of the 47 schools we looked at, 2 schools had no observations or exceptions noted here. And that was G.H. Reed and Enrichment Alternative, or RAS. So that was kudos to them. However, in 47 schools, And I do want to note it was 226 observations. And that's just across a couple of categories that we looked at. We didn't go into a whole lot of other things. We look at it and we kind of put it in a general categorization. And we'll talk about those things below in a very few minutes. And you'll see it's 226 occurrences of observations. So you all know the principals, actually, the actual principal of those schools, they receive a detailed memo about the things that were wrong, the actual findings, or what we call findings or observations and recommendations that we make to the school. But for the purpose of this report, we don't provide that. We just give you a high level consolidated document of what happened across the district.
All right.
All right. So we've seen cash receipts. I think you guys seen this before. Cash receipts, we look here, controls around safeguards and timely deposits. I'm not going to read this verbatim.
Thank you.
Check disbursements, we look at those things as well. And here are the bullet points here. This document's out on board docs for anybody who wants to kind of read it in its entirety. Accounting procedures, here's where we find a lot of bigger issues at. And we've seen, school safes and money is not locked up properly, deficit and inactive accounts, timely submission of fees and fines, and things of that nature. And the reason why I read that one out, because you'll see later on, this is probably the biggest area. Then there are other areas that we also noted, timely submission of audit documents, audit questionnaires. We sent out a lot of questionnaires, representation letters as well. And so when we don't get those things back timely or after one or two requests or ask or whatever it is, we then mark it as untimely and we mark it in the audit. Okay.
All right.
And then
Ms. Dorr has a comment, and then Ms. Burke has a question. Ms. Dorr?
Thank you, and thank you for your work here. We talked about this in Finance Committee, but shout out to Reed and Richmond Alternative School for having 0 notation, so yay. Obviously, we've got a lot of work to do, and I know you guys have already done a couple of trainings and are continuing to do trainings into the new year. So we appreciate your work in addressing these issues. Just to update my colleagues, another thing that we discussed in the Finance Committee was an update on recommendations for what to do with the positive account balances that are sitting in the student activity fund. So look forward to reviewing that as a committee and as a board.
Yes.
All right. Ms. Burke?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Parker, to you and your team. Job well done. I have a couple of questions, and I did read the documents on board docs in advance. Thank you so very, very, very much. I'm disappointed to see all of the disclosures per se in terms of following through. So I'm glad that you and Tanya are in place to make sure we do what is right. My first question is, since we're supposed to be at a 0 balance and due to COVID, we aren't in school, so did anything need to be changed legally regarding the use of those funds for this year? That's my first question.
As of right now, Ms. Burke, I'll be honest, there are no legal changes per se. I think we'll have to go through a couple procedural changes as how we use the money, things of that nature. We're looking at right now, doing some research behind the detailed work of the funds, that overage in the student activity funds, because some of it, I will say, while a lot of it's student refunds and we can't get back in touch with parents, things of that nature, there's also a group of those balances that come from old donors. Principals are inheriting accounts when they walk into schools that they don't know what to do with. So because they don't know what to do with them, they don't do anything with them. And so I know Mr. Desco and I, we're talking right now, and we've talked about this, we're going to get with the board. I'll make a recommendation in the next couple of meetings to take those fund balances from, take those outdated or endowed funds and things, and try to use those to use it for something else like supplies. I know we heard a comment of PPE and school supplies earlier. Well, I know there's 1 or 2 schools, they have an outdated savings account or something that if they could cash that in, they could use that to buy supplies for the kids, and that'll be something helpful towards them. So that's one of the things we're doing on our end and trying to work with finance.
All right, so my next question is, you said some schools have saving accounts? I didn't know that was permissible. Excuse me?
Some have old savings accounts.
That was never, how did that happen? That was before your time. I'm just surprised. I'm just elated to see. I was happy to get a budget when I was principal to see $8,000 or $10,000. And when I look at this and see $500,000 or more in a school's activity budget, that was accrued over the years, or because technically the money should be used during that school year, or the money, it shouldn't be sitting there and it should be used for the students. I know I used to use mine for field trips, things beyond supplies as well. So I'm just surprised to see such big amounts. And that the money is just sitting there, it's not getting any interest, is not, so that is permissible.
So I'm actually texting LaTanya. She's actually listening in. She's not feeling too well tonight. But,
okay. Sorry to hear that.
Yeah. So, but no, it is not permissible.
Thank you.
It is not, and I'll be honest. We've had that conversation. It is not permissible. And one of the things is we have to take a hard stance on those things when we see them. And I want to say this, not but I don't know if a hard stance was taken previously, that it's not permissible. In the new manual, we've indicated that they are not permissible. If we see them, I'll be honest, schools are going to get dinged for them. And that's just how it is, because there are certain savings accounts, and again, for those of you listening, savings accounts, because it's an account that it can't be accounted for technically. Once you get the money in there, nobody can account for it but 1 or 2 people, and then it's a free-for-all if they wanted to do something, because student activity funds are such it's a propensity to have high fraud in it. And so no, savings accounts and CDs and stuff like that are not permissible, not in the student activity fund.
Well, Mr. Parker, I look forward to you and LaTanya getting this situated. And I know where the breakdown came in place when your position as it is now was done away with, and there was no oversight as it should have been. So because to see that type of money, and knowing that we have children in our city that are doing without certain supplies or whatever else, and the money's there in a checking account, not getting any interest, and also a savings account. I'm doing my era. And when we did have people in place, and a whole team to monitor that, that wasn't a good end result. So every principal, every finance person, and I feel for our office associates, because technically they're the ones, most of them in most schools, now unless there's a teacher or someone else, they're the ones that's being held responsible for making sure money is deposited on time, making sure it's receipted. It's a lot. It's a lot. I know every now and then some schools were able to hire someone part-time or whatever to take care of their finances, because just as I read, you should have somebody there to monitor when you're counting, because fraud does take place. You're absolutely correct. I'm not saying in the city of Richmond, but neighboring schools, I know it has, because there's no oversight. So I look forward to hearing that every school is in place, done well, and kudos to those 2 schools that did follow through as expected. Well done. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms.
One last question, if I may. And I think I asked this the last time. So the principals and the finance persons are participating in workshops together, professional development.
Yes. So I'm glad you asked that question, because yes, Audit, we work together with finance. Audit actually facilitated a principal training based around student activity funds that was attended by every school. I want to say it was APs as well as actual principals on that call, and even some special assistants, it seemed like. So that was a well-attended training. From a finance perspective, finance conducted a financial training for the financial officers or financial associates, and well-attended training. It was a lot of questions, a lot of answers, a lot of, just how do we operate through certain accounts, what's right, what's wrong. And again, people just wanting and gaining for the, just for that educational moment. That was a real good thing for us.
That's great to do what is right. And I do hope there is an opportunity for the principals and the finance officers to be together
Yes, ma'am.
at the same
Please, I
time
got
in
you.
receiving information. That makes a big difference.
Yes, ma'am.
But oftentimes principals get busy and we just sign off. So that's great if everybody can get the information at the same time and be on the same page. I'm sure that would help greatly. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. I do not see any other questions or comments. So thank you, Mr. Parker.
All right, thank you.
And then 5.02, receive input from board members, budget priorities.
Thank you, Ms. Owen. I just wanted to create a space for board members to reflect on our decision this evening. We're going to talk about calendar in a little bit, and just share, as you've been talking with your constituents and as you think about the upcoming budget season, the reality of COVID and all of its attendant challenges. As we do enter the budget season, if there are particular priorities related to these issues, related to the strategic plan that you would like to raise and emphasize so that we can keep those into consideration as we prepare a budget for your consideration in January.
Mr. Young.
Madam Chair, year-round calendar, I think should be among our very top priorities.
Ms. Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I would like to, and I think that, the use of devices, I don't see as something that's going to change one way or the other. And so I want to ensure that our budget encompasses, ongoing use of devices and the maintenance. And I want to ensure that we have the IT staff in order to support that. I believe that some of the IT work is being outsourced now. I would really like to see, whether or not there might be benefit bringing some of that internally. So I think that's very important to consider. I think that there are, staff needs in the building that we've been talking a lot about due to the pandemics, such as additional school counselors. And I think that we should look back at the strategic plan and see, with the new board and determine, where do we go from here? Perhaps also from a timing standpoint. So yeah, I think those are things that I put high on the list. What are the, where are the biggest needs now from the district, given the circumstances from a staffing standpoint? I think would be interesting to hear. I know transportation is always an issue. I would suspect that's going to continue. So what do we need to do to make sure that we have the drivers that we need? Yeah, I think those are the things that are top of mind for me. And I'd like to know too, given where we're at, what are the things from the budget, from the strategic plan that we just are not going to be able to get to, given everything else that we have on our plate? So I guess I would like to see recommendations on both sides.
Mr. Barlow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's pretty important to I think everyone has talked about this. We obviously made a very consequential decision tonight about going virtual for this next semester. So heading into the new year, there's a lot of talk about how we make sure that our students are up to speed. So interventionists, reading specialists in our buildings, I think will be very important. Any additional support we can provide from an instructional standpoint will go a long way when more one-on-one or small group care for our students. And then of course, as noted, counselors and things of that nature. So.
Ms. Dorr?
Hi. We have kicked the can down the road on alternative education plan, so I'd like to see us take that up this year. Attendance, we've experimented with some things. I'm not sure if we really cracked the nut on that, so I'd like to see a more robust plan around addressing our student attendance. We had to obviously punt on the early childhood behavioral intervention pilot, but I'd like to see that included. Agree on year-round school, and then I would put sort of under student health, mental health, healthy food, exercise, etc. So just a real, I think now it's incumbent on us when our kids return that we're focused on holistic health of our kids.
Ms. Cosby?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with my colleagues in terms of year-round schools. I mean, you all know that. I've been beating that drum for some time. Yes, alternative education. Also, if we can just look at, in addition to the support services, as Mr. Barlow mentioned, the interventionists, but also we can look at still providing support for some of the programs that we are embarking upon that I would say are experimental programs that I think are great. For example, I know RPS has partnered with RRHA and with the Office of Community Wealth Building for the the first part I know I'm going to say wrong, but the community ambassadors who are in our housing developments.
That's
and
correct.
So right now the funding is coming from COVID funds, COVID-19 funds that might run out. But if this is something that we can support, because it's not just for this time, that is a concept that I know is very similar, Mr. Cameron, to what I had mentioned to you when we talk about the Harlem Children's Zone and getting people from the community, supporting them so that they can support us in our needs. And they're the ones who have their finger on the pulse of the community. I think it's a great program. I'm excited to see the results of it as we're going forward and as the various matrix are being created. But to support programs like that, things that are non-traditional, out of the box type of programs that we need to provide wraparound support for our communities as we're all going through this and beyond. So I think a program like that is great as we're dealing with COVID, but even beyond COVID is what I'm saying. And to my colleagues, I will suggest, just as we are seeing improvements in the short time that we've had our internal auditor, I will suggest a policy analyst or someone who can help with policy. Our function, we're about budget, the fiscal oversight and policy. Sometimes we get so bogged down that we don't necessarily, or we are not necessarily focusing on the policy and how policy can drive some of the decisions, or can really drive our direction, some of the things that we want to put in place. And we have to really focus on that. So I would just suggest to my colleagues and to those who are coming in to really look at support with policy. I think. And I would just say also, as we talk about equity, any type of assistance, I know we've talked about our facilities being used with our community organizations, but also we have a lot of community organizations that have just opened up their doors to support our families, to make sure that our students remain connected. And if we can look at some kind of way of helping to support them. We have a lot of churches that have opened up their doors, and all of us know that many of our churches are not open themselves. So their physical bandwidth is limited, but yet they are making sacrifices to make sure that they are helping the community. And as MLK would say, the beloved community, and that's what they're doing to uplift the community. So if we can support that any kind of way, whether it is with legislation to the state or our funding, or a call to the city, that would be great. So those are the things I have.
All right, Ms. Dorr, then Ms. Burke. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Gibson, then Ms. Dorr, then Ms. Burke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was thankful Ms. Dorr brought up alternative education. That's something that we wanted to talk about for some time, and I think it's important that we revisit that. On a related note too, it made me think, we spoke in the summer about our school resource officers, and this is really something that has budget implications. So, as Mr. Cameras, you've made the recommendation that they are removed from the school. There's a big question is what would replace them? So how would that work if we were to transform the way we are approaching discipline as I hope that we do? There are always budget implications there. Another thing that I recall I've heard from folks, I was thankful that we made adjustments to the salaries for our instructional aides. But as I understand it, they're still not making a working wage. There are folks that still are having to have multiple jobs. I would really like to revisit those salary levels as well. I think that those are the main ones. Thank you.
Ms. Dorr, then Ms. Burke.
I'll let Ms. Burke speak first since she hasn't had a chance.
Ms. Burke.
Sorry, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Dorr. I'm in agreement with everything that my colleagues have already stated, particularly as I stated earlier, supporting the technology piece. Not knowing, as I think Dr. Sapina stated earlier as well, we don't know what else is going to come down the pipe. So I do hope that we keep on our budget plan moving forward, the opportunity to replace the old laptops and money enough to make sure that every teacher assistant, every student has what he or she should have. So that technology piece is very important. And I also would like us to look at the point where, as I'm thinking about elementary students, especially the little ones, to add in as a part of our curriculum, training on how to utilize. I know that we did it virtually, but once we get back in schools as well, ample training for our students in using their Chromebooks or their tablets or whatever they're using per se. Just as we teach, have that moment of mindfulness, which our parents love. Just also a 15-20-minute session on how do you utilize your technology, and that will go into the instructional department. I also want to concur with what Mrs. Cosby stated, 2 points regarding the community wealth building project. The ambassadors, you're correct, Ms. Cosby, ambassadors and the connectors, I believe they're called. What my concern is regarding right now the city of Richmond through their CARES money, I believe. Is that correct, Mr. Cameras? They're paying for that supportive program to check on our children for attendance, to check on our children to see what their needs are. And I love the program per se because it's the people who live in the community are the persons that are implementing the program. What my question is, as we move forward, and I know this is a city's project, and I know city council's meeting is coming up soon, but our child care facilities, such as Peter Paul Development Center, the YMCA, and whomever else that's utilizing our buildings, plus Ms. Cosby, most of the churches that now are getting funds except one. We have one on the waiting list, and that's the one that looked in your area. They're just waiting on approval, but the money runs out December 31st. So what my question is to our board and to our administration, this is a city, the $3.2 million that the mayor put in place to cover for the child care centers. What's going to happen since we're not going back to school second semester? Am I making sense to you? You look perplexed, Ms. Owen. So what I would like to know is,
I'm just listening.
Is that the money has to be spent. I know the school system received their money for 2 years. I don't know why, but we're going to, the few children that are in the programs, and I don't think anybody is full that I know of, but the churches, for instance, I have 2 churches in my district and that have an awesome program. They started without the finance piece, but they are getting something to cover some of stipends or whatever. But what's going to happen when that money runs out December 31st? Where will our children go that are currently in those programs for childcare? Have we asked the city if they have other options for us? That's my question regarding budgets.
Ms. Owen, may I briefly respond?
Yes.
Mrs. Burke, my understanding is that is precise topic of our
Can't hear you,
education
cutting up.
compact meeting. I'm sorry, I was saying my understanding that the issue you raised, continuing to fund those centers, is exactly what will be the main topic of the education compact meeting, so that as a city, maintain those and ensure that kids have that support.
So the city is going to pick it up until we get more CARES money, hopefully.
We don't know.
For the city, but at a minimum, all the decision makers will be in a room together to figure it out.
Excellent, thank you. Just don't want any more of our children to be left behind.
Yes.
All right, Ms. Dorr.
One other note is I'd love to see us come to a resolution on the Career and Technical Center and what we do with the Altria building, and come to a resolution on the work that the Vacant Property Commission has been working on.
Okay. And I assume if people think of something else, Mr. Cameras, they can contact you directly in the next week or so.
Absolutely. This was all very, very helpful. So thank you to each and every one of you. We are working diligently.
You are.
Presenting it. You can't hear me?
You keep breaking up.
I think my connection's bad. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Then moving on, reports from board members. Ms. Wilson, I think mine was the only one.
Yes, and it's posted to board docs.
Posted to board docs about the Head Start Policy Council. So if any of you would like to know about our last retreat, it's there, very brief. And it's public, so anybody can go read it. And so now an overview of the RPS Legislative Advocacy Plan. Oh, Mr. Barlow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have a direct report. There haven't been substantial updates since last time I've reported on Code RVA and Maggie Walker, but I did want to take a second to encourage my colleagues to consider serving on those boards moving forward. I think Maggie Walker in particular, well, actually both schools are going to have some significant issues to consider over the the next handful of months, and I'd be happy to loop anyone in on some of the challenges that those schools are facing right now. But my hope is that, particularly given some of these challenges that we're seeing, that we can have some experienced leadership in each of those. And I know that that people often sort of, well, I'll just say the regional schools. They both have, obviously, they both have students from every district in Richmond attending. So anyone should feel comfortable taking one of those seats if you've got the bandwidth.
Thank you, Mr. Barlow. All right, so an overview of the RPS Legislative Advocacy Plan.
Hi, good evening, Chairwoman Owen, Vice Chair Burke, members of the board, Superintendent Cameras, Matthew Stanley, the Director of Advocacy and Outreach in the Office of Engagement. I have an update for you tonight on legislative priority development for the 2021 session of the General Assembly. If you notice my virtual background, we are now in our advocacy season. And so I'm looking forward to engagement of our board members, our families, our students, our staff, as we continue to try to work with the state to advocate for further educational funding and educational policies that really address equity and the needs of our district. So I'm going to go ahead and share the presentation with you all. And I'm going to start tonight by giving you just a bit of a special session recap. The last time that I presented to you, the General Assembly was in their special session, and the House and Senate at that point had released their versions of the budget, and we were waiting on them to vote on that and then for the governor to approve that. At the end of the day, many of the items that we were advocating for during the special session were funded or were included in that final budget. There was a hold harmless for sales tax revenue declines from this year. It was $95 million across the state. A number of other COVID relief funding was provided. A per pupil payment of $175 per student, additional childcare stabilization funding, money for partnerships for emergency childcare programs, and additional GEARS funding for more short-term technology needs. There were also the two language amendments, one of them regarding enrollment loss. This is really significant for school divisions across the state, and language was put in that special session budget that will delay any reduction in state aid for enrollment declines until the end of the school year. This is a topic that we expect the General Assembly to dig in a little bit deeper when they do meet in their session in January. And we should hopefully know more about what the General Assembly may be looking to do with enrollment-based funding as they develop their budgets in January. I'll also note that in the special session budget that they passed, there were two restorations of funding that they're planning for FY22. One of those was the expansion of early childhood education programs, and then a little bit of extra money going into the at-risk add-on program. I'll talk a little bit more about the at-risk add-on program in a couple slides. But then the other thing that I would point you to is that there is language that is directing the governor to include the 2% salary increase for teachers in the introduced budget that he's presenting in a week, provided that current state revenue projections are sufficient. And we'll touch on that as well a bit later in the presentation. Now that this special session budget was adopted and is in place for FY21, the governor, as I mentioned, will be introducing his proposed budget for FY22. It's really amendments to the budget that the General Assembly passed this last year. He will be introducing that next week, and then the General Assembly will be considering that in their session in January that starts on January 13th. There are some political dynamics going on with the special session right now. The House has indicated that they will be holding their session virtually, while the Senate will be meeting in person at the Science Museum. The Capitol and the Pocahontas building will both be closed to the public, so many of our normal advocacy activities will all be virtual this year. I will also note that the Republicans in the General Assembly have indicated that they will not agree to the normal procedural resolution that allows for the special session to go 45 days in an odd year, and they will be limited to a 30-day session. It will make the speed of things very, very quick in January and early February. And then essentially what we are expecting is that after that regular session has concluded, that at some point soon thereafter, the governor will probably call the legislature back into another special session so that they can continue their work. So a little speed bump, but I think at the end of the day, the legislature is very committed to ensuring that they're meeting the needs of Virginians, and we look forward to their work probably more than just in this winter and throughout 2021. So I'm going to want to move into some of what we have been starting to think about for policy priorities for RPS to advocate for this coming session. As I mentioned, with it being limited to a 30-day session and some of the volatility of just what is happening right now, we are recommending that we zero in on a couple key priorities and really focus those around equitable-based funding models. I think most of you will likely remember that last year, the Board of Education prescribed new standards of quality that they recommended to the General Assembly. It was a very large package of policy changes and funding decisions, and very little of that was put in place last year. The General Assembly essentially said, we don't have the money to do all of this, so we're not really going to take up this package. Now, this year, the Board of Education has reaffirmed these standards of quality recommendations, and they will be put forth again to the General Assembly in this coming session. There are a few really key programs that fall within this package of recommendations. One of those is the Equity Fund, and that is what I'm going to zero in on my next slide, and is what I recommend being the key policy priority for RPS this coming year. There are also other programs within those recommendations that would continue to invest in our teachers and create new teacher leader and teacher mentor programs. I think that this is very aligned to the work that RPS is trying to do with our RVA Men Teach and our Male Teacher of Colors initiative. Then there's also a recommendation regarding the ratio of teachers to students for our English language learners. The General Assembly did make some progress this year on providing more funding for more of those positions, but there was a key provision within the board's recommendations that actually ties ratios to the proficiency of students, so that if you have lower proficiency ESL students, you will actually receive funding for more ESL teachers. We know that things are not one size fits all, and we really believe that this actually addresses the disparities that exist in school divisions across the state by further tying the staffing requirements to the actual proficiency level of our students. So as I mentioned, this coming session, the legislation will be introduced again. I have already confirmed with Senator McClellan's office that she is planning to introduce it. It is going to be the full package once again, and it will be a very big number that gets tied to this whole package of recommendations. In general, we really support a lot of these recommendations. We know that the state does not have money to fund all of them, but at their core, they are very good policies that the Board of Education has spent much time, months and months and months, coming up with that they believe support our school divisions across the state. So it is a recommendation that we support these SOQ revisions as a core advocacy priority for 2021, but we really want to zero in on the specific goal of advancing equity-based funding that I'm going to talk about now. And so we talked about the Equity Fund a bit last year. It was kind of the first and most significant of the recommendations contained within the Board of Education's proposals. And what the Equity Fund is it is the consolidation of the existing at-risk add-on program with the stream of funding labeled Prevention, Intervention, and Remediation Funds. It combines both of those funding streams into one expanded program known as the Equity Fund. And the key piece about this is that it revises the funding formula so that both of those funding streams under the Equity Fund are all based on the division-wide free lunch rate. That it eliminates an academic outcome factor that's currently used in the PIR, the Prevention, Intervention, Remediation Funds, which we do not receive as much funding through that outcome factor. We actually receive more funding through the division-wide free lunch rate. And therefore, that combination, that merging of those funding streams really comes out to benefit RPS. We had done some really good advocacy work last year, had some great policy discussions with leaders, with some of our budget leaders in the General Assembly. There were some questions from them about how the at-risk add-on program was used. And I know the Department of Education was doing some work to provide the General Assembly some more follow-up information about that program so they can revisit this year. The additional funding was provided, as I mentioned, for this coming year in that FY22 budget restoration that the General Assembly approved, another $35 million. In the original recommendations that the Board of Education provided, they actually called for $131 million in additional funding. We do not expect that the state has the resources for those, but even without additional funding, just the combination of those existing funding streams works out to the benefit of RPS. So we consider this to be the biggest goal that we have within RPS. We feel like we can be a leader statewide in really advocating for this among all of those Board of Education recommendations. And so I am recommending to you tonight that that is our primary advocacy goal for 2021. And then finally, I just want to touch base on a couple other state legislative advocacy priorities that we consider to be still important. We would not be talking about any of these as our core goals, but these are all significant funding streams that we know are very important for our division. One of those is alternative education. I know that you've talked a bit about this tonight, and it's something that legislators and school divisions across the state have been advocating for some time now, that the state actually provide meaningful state funding for locally driven alternative education programs. Most of the state funding right now for this type of program is for regional alternative education programs. And we really believe that if the state wants to get serious about this, that they need to actually provide funding to school divisions directly instead of the regional approach. We know our students better. We are able to fund these programs and move a little bit more quickly and serve more students by doing a locally driven program rather than participating in the regional programs. Teacher compensation, I mentioned before that the General Assembly has directed the governor to include that 2% staff raise in his proposed budget if the state is meeting revenue projections. One of the key provisions that we will continue to advocate for with this is to ensure maximum flexibility in state match requirements, potentially not requiring a state match from school divisions to raise teacher salaries. This will ensure maximum flexibility as we're doing our budgeting process, that we can ensure that we are able to pass on any state increases to our teachers. Support staff, this includes counselors, nurses, social workers. There still exists the support staff cap that was put in place after the 2008 recession. That continues to limit the number of state-funded support staff positions that we have, and I know it continues to be a major budgetary pain point for school divisions across the state. So while there are some specific support staff ratio adjustments that are included in the Board of Education recommendations, we still believe that that support staff cap is something that needs to be rescinded. It's an arbitrary limit on the number of those positions and really prevents us from maximizing the use of how we fund support staff. I've already talked a little bit about English language learners. You can see a little bit more of the detail of that proficiency-based proposal there. And then on the topic of school construction, there's very unlikely to be legislative action on this during either this upcoming very short session or even in any special session next year. This past year, we had two major wins. One of those was the creation of the School Construction and Modernization Commission. And so we are very excited to work with that commission as they begin their work. I've reached out to the Department of Legislative Services, as well as to Senator McClellan and Delegate Bourne, who both serve on that commission. And we will be working with them as that commission starts meeting with the goal that they are bringing forth new recommendations for school construction to the 2022 General Assembly. Governor Northam also, when he was amending legislation at the end of the regular session this year, he added an amendment to the gaming legislation allowing casinos that directs future casino revenues to school construction. That revenue is not likely to be realized until probably the year 2024, so it is a bit ways off, and we expect that there should continue to be work on school construction in the meantime through the work of that School Construction and Modernization Commission. So I didn't want to leave that out. I know it is still a very significant issue, but just wanted to name that our advocacy efforts on that topic this year will really be starting to work with that commission. And so finally, I just wanted to share a little bit about some of our upcoming advocacy plans. These are all things that are happening between now and the beginning of session. We continue to work with our Student Advisory Council and really allow them and empower them to be leaders talking about advocacy issues that are affecting RPS. Next week, they will be holding a press conference to talk about some of these priorities. They've also been working on a new advocacy art design for 2021. You can see on my background, one of the designs from 2020. So this year, we're very excited to empower our students and allow them to put their own stamp on our advocacy efforts for the coming year. Second, I've just launched a new advocacy hub on our website. Formerly, we were doing advocacy trainings and we had a PDF printable advocacy toolkit. We've actually turned that advocacy toolkit now into a living portal on our website. And so if you visit that link, rvaschools.net/advocacy, you will see a lot of different sections. There's a key section that talks about current advocacy opportunities that really allows for us to share any current way that people can get involved to advocate for the changes that, that everyone wants to see, whether that is at the local level, the state level, the federal level. We also have a kind of advocacy toolkit that talks about how to contact legislators and how to communicate with elected officials. And we also have a civic engagement toolkit that just talks about the different ways that you can be involved in state government. And so we're very excited to get that launched. One of the key things that we're featuring right now are new advocacy trainings that are being coordinated through our Family Academy. We have 4 upcoming virtual trainings. They're about an hour each. We provide a great crash course in how to advocate and about the issues we're advocating for. Spanish interpretation will be available for some of those. And then I'm also excited with this virtual environment, we have to think about new things to do. And so on the first day of session, when the governor presents his annual State of the Commonwealth address, we are going to have a virtual watch party where we'll share the State of Commonwealth address over Zoom, and I'll provide some commentary. And then at the end of that, we'll have some reflections and talk about the ways that people can get involved after that. So very excited about our advocacy activities coming up in this virtual environment. It is going to be a new challenge, but one that I'm sure that we will embrace. And so with that, I would love to take any questions that you have, any comments or questions that you have about the advocacy priorities that I've outlined for you today. And I'm generally looking for some consensus to move forward with advocating for the Equity Fund as our primary advocacy priority for 2021.
Thank you so much, Mr. Stanley. You are an amazing guy.
Thank you.
And I am looking to see if there are any comments in the chat. So any questions? But this all sounds really good to me.
Well, I'll go, seeing as there are none. I just want to say thank you to Matthew and the team for really incredible work, continuing to push our advocacy and adapting to the virtual environment. As much as I love running across the street and going to the Pocahontas building to meet with I'm excited to stalk them all over Zoom this year, and really looking forward to taking things up a notch and not letting the pandemic stop us at all. So thank you so much. Really excited about what's ahead.
I agree. Thank you so much.
Thank you
all right. Then we will move on to our update on our MOU. Who's doing that one?
Thank you. I will share. We met just last week with the Office of School Quality, trying to keep all of my acronyms in order, for our, I guess it's now quarterly CAP meetings. Our next one is scheduled for February. It was a really successful and, dare I say, wonderful meeting. There was a lot of great discussion. One of our liaisons at the DOE said that it was, quote, the most productive and I think positive meeting that we have had between RPS and the VDOE. And there was a real sentiment that a lot of the foundational pieces are getting in place, enabling us to begin to move forward on a lot of the core outcome measures. It was reemphasized that we are being relieved of some of the purchase order requirements that we were under previously, given that multiple cycles have occurred with no issues. And by and large, again, very positive. A large focus of the meeting was on, obviously, response to COVID, how we're managing through all of that. And we, went through the details and whatnot. But again, we'll be back with them in February to give a further update on how things have been going. Hopefully we'll have, not hopefully, we will have more data at that point in terms of academics and attendance and so on and so forth. Obviously, we'll share all that as it becomes available with the board. But by and large, again, a very successful meeting. Michelle, anything that you would like to add on that front?
I would say just two very quick things. The first is to go along with your point about it being a successful meeting. I think not only did the VDOE note that they were pleased with the strategies that were in place, they were very focused on monitoring and making sure that you're tracking outcomes and making adjustments as needed. And they really saw that in place. So that was a nice testament to the work and to our teams. And then the second piece is they did hire a new staff member to be working with us, an associate director who would be kind of filling in for Dr. Revia. And I unfortunately now his name escapes me, but I will get that. And I think so we'll have a new person to work with as well.
Right. Thank you, both of you. I'm glad to hear that things are going so well. It does seem to be a more collegial, more and more as we go through this, and that's excellent. Okay, I don't see anybody else. It looks like we're good to go on to options for the 2021-2022 school calendar.
That's me. Good evening, Chair Owen, Vice Chair Burke, school board members, Superintendent Camrus. I'm going to share my screen. Just give me 1 second here. Can you all see this? Okay. In preparation for our 2021 school year, actually 21-22, we believe it's critical to approach our calendar more creatively to make up for the impact of COVID. As we begin that work, we wanted to provide the board with some initial options and seek your feedback. Among our primary objectives, there really are, we've tried to narrow these to three. First and foremost is to add instructional and enrichment time to meet students' academic and social emotional needs as a result of COVID, with a particular emphasis on literacy. To get creative with our scheduling within the day to provide more opportunities for individualized or small group student support by our most talented teachers and interventionists, and to leverage the technology enhancements we've made to support student learning. In terms of timeline, we want to take enough time to really get input and feedback, not only from the board, but from our community and stakeholders. And so we imagine taking the next December and January to gather feedback through our various advisory councils, as well as the public, present drafts to you all in January, the second January board meeting, gather feedback from our broader community and staff, and then present a final recommendation to the board by late February or early March. When we think about the options for consideration, well, there are many different specific details to be worked out in a calendar. We really see this as two major options. One, circling back to the conversations this board has had around a year-round calendar, or thinking about our traditional calendar with adjustments. In either scenario, we do not imagine our current calendar, traditional calendar, being an option, meaning status quo seems an insufficient response coming out of this school year. So with both of these options, there are several decision points embedded in those. And those include whether to keep the number of instructional days to 180 or more. Just keeping in mind that a year-round calendar does not necessarily mean more instructional days for students. We also have the opportunity to decide whether to begin the school year before Labor Day. Also an opportunity to adjust our schedules to better reflect brain science with our elementary students starting earlier and our high school students starting later. And finally, how to adjust schedules to more formally build in individualized and small group support time for students. Some of the key features of our year-round calendar. Again, there's many different models, but in general, they almost all include some version of the following. First, instructional days are typically spread out over an 11th-month period, typically reserving at least one full month for summer vacation. When we start and end, obviously, can vary greatly. For example, we could start in early August and run through late June, leaving July as a summer break. Or we could start after Labor Day and go through late July, leaving August as a summer break. A second feature is extended breaks are built in through the calendar, and these are typically referred to as intersessions. And these can vary in length, but they typically run 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks if they are tacked onto a traditional holiday or traditional break. But what these also provide are opportunities to serve, to provide targeted support and enrichment opportunity for students who need that. And so just because there are intercessions built in doesn't mean some students will have the opportunity to be in school even during that time. And this really, this is one of the biggest benefits, which allows schools to help avoid much of the summer slide. And the extent to which we make intercessions really focused and targeted and high impact is the extent to which you get, I would say, a return on our investment of changing up the calendar so significantly. Typically also, we would include traditional holidays, federal, state, and local would still be maintained in a year-round calendar. And just to kind of give you a sample of the rhythm, if you think about sort of instruction, you typically have about 45 days and then an intercession. Maybe the fall can look a little funny with the both Thanksgiving and winter holiday. Some more instruction, maybe a shorter Thanksgiving, but then that leads up to winter break where you have a longer intercession, another 45 days, spring break along with 2 more weeks of intercession, and then instruction, and then summer break where we would also likely have an extended intercession / summer school. During the intercession, and what we would really propose is an intense focus on literacy, given how important we know that outcome is for our student success. And so a traditional schedule, and this would follow some of what we've tried to reboot our summer school as already with various partners, so that we have an academic acceleration or support time in the morning with enrichment time in the afternoon. In terms of some of the benefits and challenges, there are the benefits include we could certainly reduce learning loss due to avoid the summer slide with a shorter summer. It would also mean less childcare expense for working families. The intercessions allow us to really focus and provide targeted support to students who need the most. This will be particularly helpful following this current school year and COVID. Intercessions also provide the opportunity for a break for teachers and staff throughout the year. And for those who wanted to earn additional pay, teachers and staff could certainly opt to work during intercessions, but that would not be a requirement. And then this would also create an opportunity to expand our partnerships with our local organizations like Peter Paul, Next Up, the YMCA, to provide camp-like experiences for students throughout the year, and to work closely with the city and the Out of School Time Initiative. There's certainly challenges that come with, changing our calendar significantly. One would certainly be the initial disruption to the normal routine. We think, though, if there were a time to make this move, it would certainly be following something like a pandemic, because our lives have been, disrupted already. And so this might be if we were going to ever make such a shift, this could be the right time to do so. But there certainly would be some getting used to the schedule. Shortening the summer would mean less time for other non-school activities. Families whose students do not participate in intercession would need to identify childcare during these times. Though we do believe we could partner with out-of-school time partners to assist with this by expanding programming. And intercessions are not cheap. They would carry an additional cost of about $2 million per cycle based on the number of students we would want to serve during this time. When we think about option 2, thinking about an adjusted traditional calendar. And so if we think about our traditional calendar, again, you could still decide to add instructional days, or lengthen the day, or create more formal after-school programming. We could utilize staggered start and end times, creating flex scheduling that allows us to lengthen the amount of time for students while not without changing the number of hours for teachers. In any scenario, though, it is our recommendation that any school calendar find a way to provide additional learning time for students, because we are going to need it coming out of this pandemic. If you thought about adding weeks or days to the school year, that's a fairly costly proposition. It's about $5 million per week. And each additional hour to the day would cost about $15 million for the year. And of course, benefits of this calendar, it would be less disruptive because it's very similar to what families experience now. The extra days or longer days would allow teachers to slow down and make time for intervention and support. And additional time could mean more pay for teachers and staff. The challenges, additional days or longer days are certainly quite expensive without using flex scheduling. The longer days, if we didn't use a flexible schedule, could lead to staff burnout, and the summer slide would continue to negatively impact our students' learning. And for regional context, while we don't know for certain what our neighbors are doing, as of now, Hopewell City Schools is planning to implement a year-round calendar, and Chesterfield Public Schools plans to do so for selected schools. And these are some of the features within their calendar, very similar to the graphic we showed you earlier. And Henrico currently plans to utilize a traditional calendar. With that, I will pause and take any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. App. I will just say that Henrico does have one school at Highland Springs Elementary that has an extended calendar.
Okay.
And that might be something for people to talk to those folks that work there as this goes forward.
Absolutely.
And I'm looking to see if people have questions or comments. Ms. Cosby?
Thank you. So thank you to the administration. As you all can imagine, I am extremely happy to finally have received this presentation. I think that there are definitely benefits to looking at a year-round calendar, especially as I've said over and over and over again, as we are dealing with COVID. And, we've already had an achievement gap that we were contending with. And with COVID, we're going to have a significant COVID gap. So I am very happy that we're looking at this, that this will be for consideration for the upcoming board. And I look forward to reading about the teacher and family comments. I will say this, help me to understand the cost for the intercessions that you mentioned and for the first option. So how would this be different? And maybe I just have not I've missed something. If we were to do the, break up the calendar year, similar to like Patrick Henry, are they paying an additional cost for those? Help me. I just don't understand why the cost would be so much. So anyway.
Sure. So, if we do not add days and you have 180 days spread out with intersessions, that implies that staff and students are generally off during that time. So the school year would still be, if we decided not to add days, 180 days. What you're paying for is, think of it like mini summer schools. So you're paying for the extra pay for people to staff the intercessions for students who need additional academic support. Now, some of that may be offset with Title I dollars or grant our early intervention reading dollars. So some of that money could be offset, likely not all of it, but some of that cost could be offset by kind of repurposing maybe tutors during the 45-day cycles and targeting that money to intercessions. But that's an estimated cost of an 8 to 4 day for 2 weeks through 4 times throughout the year.
Okay. All right.
Okay. All right, Mr. Young and then Ms. Dorr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just briefly, I'd share that if out of all this awfulness, some good can materialize, not unlike, for example, we're now a 1-to-1 school district. That's a very important development. I think that this is another opportunity, and the time is now. I think it is of our utmost responsibility to now adopt a very different kind of calendar. And I look forward to leveraging the budget process to achieve that. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Dorr.
Thanks. I agree with my colleagues. I'm really excited to see this. I think that when we say year-round calendar, it can mean really different things to different people. So I appreciate the time taken here to define this for us, and would encourage us to be sort of maybe just think through the names as we roll it out to staff. I know sometimes we say year-round calendar and teachers automatically think, okay, I'm working more with no additional pay. And I want to make sure that that's clear, that the trade-offs are clear to our staff. And that the benefits, and I've certainly been privy to it. I'm positive that you all obviously have read much more than me, but helping to educate the public about why this works from a scientific and educational perspective. And I think, conversely, what are some of the considerations, which I know you've highlighted here at a high level, but bringing in some of that research, I think could be helpful as we roll this out to the public and help us vision around that. And then I also love expanding the conversation to thinking about brain science and start times. I think that's really smart. I know that's easier said than done as it relates to our bus schedule and our childcare, et cetera. But I do think I appreciate the addition of that to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Epp. It is obvious that you and your team have worked really, really hard on this, collecting data, and I appreciate it so much.
Thank
I don't
you.
see any other, give it another moment. I don't see any other people at this point, but it's a lot of information to take in and consider. So thank you again. And we will move on to, we already did CAFR, so we have 2 other informational items. We already did budget transfers, or was this one that we didn't?
These items actually I apologize, should be on a different agenda. We thought there would be an other informational one under 10,000 and we did not have it. And Janelle and I are finalizing the insurance piece. So I'll have that next time.
All right. Well, that's excellent. And we don't have a closed session tonight. So I am going to take a point of privilege to say that I have absolutely, I won't say that I enjoyed every moment of these 4 years. We've had some tough times. And I appreciate the little scrolling through at the beginning. That was fun to see all the things we've accomplished. So as my parting words are these: the best thing we've done, the most important thing we've done in my 4 years is to hire Jason Camrus as the superintendent. And with that said, I adjourn this meeting.